To Win, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
We're fighting for everybody here. We're fighting for the middle class, and we're fighting for good jobs in our 3 states, but for everybody else.
1,900 workers on strike at Fairpoint Communications in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Demands for $700 million in concessions and the unlimited ability to outsource their jobs using non-union labor. Diane Winton, president of IBEW Local 2327, says workers recognize the company's need for concessions and offered more than $200 million. But that wasn't enough.
They want to outsource every faction of our jobs, whether it be center jobs or the technicians' jobs. They want to outsource all of it. We saw this coming, over a year ago. So we've been preparing, and the people out on the lines, the spirits are very high. They knew what the bargaining team was up against, and they supported us in all 3 states wholeheartedly, and they're in it to win it.
1,700 of the striking Fairpoint workers are IBEW. 300 are represented by the Communications Workers of America. Hundreds of current and former FedEx ground workers are suing the company for back overtime pay and to recover paycheck deductions. FedEx Ground claims the workers are independent contractors, not employees. The Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, though, ruled these workers in California and Oregon are employees. The Seventh Circuit Court in Chicago is looking at an appeal of an Indiana ruling that sided with FedEx Ground on the workers' status. By claiming their workers are contractors rather than employees, companies can cut as much as 30% from labor costs while dodging Social Security and other payroll taxes and not paying overtime. But these FedEx ground workers work under tight company rules and have to toe the company line, even as FedEx Ground claims they're not employees. As Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen expresses concerns about the impact of growing income and wealth inequality on the U.S. economy, economists are looking at growing data suggesting that economic growth is being hurt by that inequality. Aggregate demand is what drives economic growth and jobs creation, with more money being saved rather than being spent by the rich and less money in the pockets of working people. That aggregate demand has grown more sluggish. A new report from the Economic Policy Institute says the government could save $7.6 billion on public benefits to workers living in poverty if the minimum wage went up to $10.10 an hour. The report said if the federal minimum wage had kept pace with productivity growth since the 1960s, the last time it was tied to inflation, it would be $18.42 today.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can do business with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. The election 2 weeks away. 2 weeks from this very day, we'll be casting the ballot to see who the next governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is going to be. And, governors across the country also going to decide the makeup, the complexity of the state house and the state senate, as well as the entire congressional delegation. going to be interesting to see how things wash out in this election year as Democrats have kind of taken it on the chin. The Ebola talk, I guess it just got me stumped. I mean, it's amazing that, in my view, the folks who brought us a lot of these problems are the ones pointing the finger going, see, Obama's not doing anything. And then Obama goes and appoints an Ebola czar. I'm going, wait a second. Isn't that what the Surgeon General is? You know, the Surgeon General that the Republicans in the Senate are blocking because he had something, I don't know, something to say about the NRA and guns, which the Surgeon General has no control whatsoever over. Really? And they're getting away with it. And the sad reality is they're getting away with it. And I think a lot of it plays into our ignorance. Our ignorance of the continent known as Africa, the second largest continent on Earth. You know, ahead of us, bigger than us. And, you know, I was talking to somebody last night as the big parade was going on here in my hometown or here in Carlisle where I live. And, you know, I was talking to, you know, just a couple of people because, of course, I got sucked in on parade night to go sit at a local fast food place for an hour to, evidently they donate money to my daughter's basketball booster club, of which I am, as long as she's playing basketball, a part of. So, you know, I had this opportunity to sit and talk with a bunch of people because I was there and, you know, killing time because there had to be a representative of the booster club there in order for the donations to go through. It's a whole long story. But, you know, I had this conversation where I said, well, what if, you know, something broke in California? Someone got sick in California. Would you be all freaked out? And they said, well, no. I go, do you remember when the lettuce and everything went crazy and how here in the country, a lot of people went nuts, but not completely off their rockers because we knew where it was isolated. And we understand the size of the U.S. and we understand that you can kind of still quarantine things off. Well, understand that Africa is bigger than we are. Now, Asia is obviously the largest continent, followed by Africa, not the country of Africa, the continent of Africa. Of the 7 continents, we're number 3 behind Asia and Africa, ahead of South America, though. But I just find it amazing that there's this, and part of me goes, it's just our failure of geography. Failure to understand the complexity of the country, of which there are, of the continent, of which there are 47 countries within. And evidently there are 3 countries of the 47 on that continent that had Ebola. The other one's nothing. So those are the ones we're still freaked out about anything in Africa. So I guess it's not surprising when you read the news of, you know, the school in New Jersey, North Burlington, New Jersey, who happened to have 2 Rwandan students who were forced to stay home because, you know, there was a fear that they would infect the others because they were from Rwanda. They hadn't actually been there. So they had to stay home. And, you know, Rwanda's not close to where the Ebola is. It's kind of like, you know, East Coast, West Coast. It's the entire width of the continent. There's another story in Mississippi of evidently a school principal decided to go for a visit to Zambia. And parents are, I'm not sending my kid to school with a principal who went to Zambia, somewhere I can't even spell or pronounce, which evidently, you know, where Zambia is in the southern part of the continent, is like 3,000 miles away from where any of the Ebola outbreak would be considered. You go to Mississippi, and I guess not surprising, New Jersey, Alabama, Mississippi, where evidently they had a bus driver who had visited Ghana. They won't let him go back to work. Sorry, no work for you, having visited that place, because, you know, Ghana's, you know, 1,000 miles away. And also, you know, not saying this is all to the south, but, you know, Wisconsin, a school district in Wisconsin, they had 2 students who I guess visited from Uganda. and Uganda's like another 3,000 miles away. And the parents keeping kids home. And it just got me thinking that, you're talking about this enormous continent where this is, and again, it goes back to this, I guess, misunderstanding or lack of knowledge when it comes to the continent and how things have worked out there. It just left me kind of shocked. But the other part of this is the business model. And Bob sent me an email that, kind of laid it out. He said, Rick, I don't know if anyone has ever died from blowing their nose, as you stated this afternoon. I got this yesterday. I was being facetious. But I get the point you were making. The reality, as you point out, is that Ebola is an unprofitable disease to cure. He said, I read somewhere that in the neighborhood of 2,400 people have died of Ebola since 1976 when it was first identified. As you stated, malaria is a much greater killer, killing an estimated 300,000 since the start of the Ebola outbreak. Tuberculosis has killed nearly another 600,000 in the same span, and yet no czar to speak of. Love the show. Nothing like it out there. Appreciate it, Bob. And you're right, Bob. There is nothing like this program out there. That's why I do it. But, no tuberculosis czar, no malaria czar, because we don't have it here. We've eradicated most of that stuff, and can do pretty well taking care of it if someone does contract it, because we have spent money on the public safety. We've spent money on public health, or we used to. I mean, we still do, but just not to the extent of the past. And, while you're looking at this from a business model, Ebola has killed I think, as Bob points out, about 2,400 people since 1976. That's not an awful lot. It's been, a good number since, the beginning of the year, which is why it's causing concern. But there's no money in it. So there are some, the conspiratorial folks, the folks I meet at the gas station who are telling me that 284 million people are going to die from this disease before it's all over because this is phase 2 of Obama's plan. Their conspiratorial minds, really, if that's the case, if this is phase 2, I would argue it's not Obama's plan, because a lot of those were his voters. It would be corporate America's plan, because if you can scare people enough to hand over all of their life savings and everything that they have to stay alive, it's a pretty good business model, don't you think? If nobody's afraid of it, nobody's funding it, you just kind of got to wonder. So all the hysteria, all of the nonsense, hopefully receding a little bit, especially as we're seeing that the guy who went to Texas from Liberia, patient number 1 there, none of the folks that he was surrounded by have contracted it. None of the people have died from it. The nurses who have gotten it have made it longer than I think most thought. But for the most part, it seems like the quarantine period over for a good number of people over, they're going to be okay. Now, at the end of this, you go, well, you do know, we're going to have to figure this out at some point. And you read the story of in Germany, where they basically moved mountains to figure out how to take care of the German lab tech who got it back in 2009 from a laboratory accident. Tells me if there's some motivation behind it, we can get it done. Just a thought. But here again, the last point I'll make on this is that this is what smart public policy is about. It's about foreseeing down the future, looking down the road and going, okay, what might happen? What might we need to react to? What do we need to be preparing people for, especially the first responders? To me, this is a failure of budgeting and priorities on the federal and state level to make sure that folks were trained and ready. Pretty simple to me. But here again, when you've run government as a starve the beast model, where you're pushing out as many people as you can, you kind of got to wonder if this isn't part of what they had hoped for, because they're having a heyday going, see, Granted, we broke it, but it doesn't work. Just kind of makes you wonder. Don't you think? Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
You might start represent. Say the USA is drowning in crafted lies. Say the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're elected for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Explosions in the Syrian city of Kobani over the weekend. The U.S. says it's reshaping the situation there. In addition to scaling up airstrikes, the U.S. delivered weapons and medicine to the city's defenders today, with the Pentagon stressing that 21 tons of goods were Kurdish in origin and were simply transported aboard American aircraft. The UN's lead official for sexual violence in conflict said today that a recent trip to South Sudan left her shocked by the hardships faced by the country's population. Zinab Bangura said she learned of widespread rapes committed by both government soldiers and rebel fighters. 74% of victims were under 18 years of age. Tens of thousands of displaced persons have fled to camps where the vast majority of shelters are currently inundated with water. That drives residents out of the compounds into rivers and streams where they are regularly preyed upon.
Anybody you know in a refugee, whether in Syria and you in the camp, you sit down from your bed, you eat with your children, you do everything on the floor. You can't do it because you actually put your foot knee-level mud. That's how bad it is with mosquitoes and everything. It's just unbelievable.
The talk these days in the running world is about breaking the 2-hour marathon mark. The current world record holder is only 2 minutes from that time. But at yesterday's running of the Beijing Marathon, none of the conditions were in place for a record performance. During the 2008 Olympics, Beijing authorities seeded clouds and shuttered factories to keep the skies clear for athletes. Sunday's race was conducted with extreme levels of air pollution, 14 times higher than what the World Health Organization says is healthy, and the kind of levels when even the Chinese government urges its citizens not to exert themselves outdoors. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. Conservative media figures have criticized President Obama's appointment of Ron Klain as the Ebola Response Coordinator, or czar. Here's Rush Limbaugh.
Ron Klain was in charge of determining who got what in the Porculus bill. Ron Klain does political payoffs. Ron Klain determined which unions got the money and how many shovel-ready jobs and school repairs and road repairs didn't get the money. He's pure 100% politics. He has no experience in any health field.
Fox News and ABC contributor Laura Ingraham criticized Klain's lack of a medical background with guest Raymond Arroyo.
Why are we getting a doctor as this guy has no medical experience. I've been looking at his record, okay?
He worked
for Ed. He's an attorney. He worked for Ed Markey. He worked for Daschle, okay?
Oh, God.
Then
this is a parade of horribles.
However, conservatives were silent when President Bush appointed Stuart Simonson as bird flu czar, a Republican insider who had no medical experience or expertise in public health. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Fight for what's right, fight
Well, the numbers are just in. That's right, the More Jobs governor. And I still love that. I love that frame that our governor, Governor Corbett, keeps throwing out as the More Jobs governor. More than whom, you may ask? Well, now more than no one. We have fallen to last place since 2011. When it comes to job growth, the September numbers just in, we lost 9,600 jobs here in the Commonwealth in the month of September, which gives us, I guess you could look at it the other way. We're number one at the bottom in job creation. And you got to go, who's the guy at the helm? Who's the guy at the top? Whose policies have we been pursuing? And you can only point to Governor Corbett, which is why I think his polling numbers so bad. Now, the point here is you got to get out 2 weeks from today and vote. Pretty simple. He can't lose if you don't vote, which is why I've asked Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, to come talk with us. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, always a pleasure to be on the show, and as usual, you're hitting the issues right on the nail on the head.
So we're last. That's not a good thing.
We're last, and we're number 50. All right. So I'm not quite sure how well, I do know how he's managed to do it. He made trickle-down economics the same failed Reagan philosophy that the right wing has been pursuing for 40 years, and with the blip of the 8 years under Clinton and soon to be 8 years under President Obama were the only periods of growth in those last 40 years, and because of unions' declining strength. Wages have not kept up with increases in productivity. But the fact is that these guys continue to think that give more money to business and business will automatically spend it down on us. That somehow, and it just doesn't make economic sense, right? I mean, if you want people to buy something, how do they do it? They have to have money, right? A billionaire can only buy so many houses.
Yep.
But a billion people can buy lots of houses. So we've got to get the money into the hands of the people, which means, and it's not a handout, right? People go to work 40 hours a week, and if they make a decent wage, that money's going right back into the economy that creates even more jobs. It's just simple, common sense economics.
Which is why I've been calling for some time an increase in the minimum wage. And one of the dubious distinctions that our president now holds is he's only one of two presidents since the minimum wage was enacted to have not raised the minimum wage. He shares that with the 8 years that Ronald Reagan spent into office. And I'm of the mindset that this has to be moved forward and quickly. And I got to be honest, I'm surprised it hasn't really been an issue in the gubernatorial race here, because we're one of the few states around that haven't done it.
Well, there are so many other issues in the gubernatorial race that, and obviously we're all committed to increasing the minimum wage. And we're going to do that when we get Tom Wolf elected as governor, if, as you said, everybody turns out. The reason we're facing this huge job loss, and you mentioned 9,600 jobs, and of course we know that since Governor Corbett's tenure, we've lost 26,000 folks who were employed in the education, whether they're bus drivers, teachers, cafeteria workers. 26,000 people have lost their jobs because he chose, instead of to replace the stimulus money with state money, he chose to give businesses a tax break, and those businesses did not spend that money. Those 26,000 people would have spent that $1 billion had the money gone to the schools and then gone to them, whether it was in school repairs or teachers or bus drivers. This guy, he clearly doesn't. He keeps handing it to the people who don't spend it. They invest it in the Caymans. They invest it in wherever they invest it, but they don't invest it in the local economy. People making the minimum wage, or people who work for a school, or people who negotiate for a pay increase at their work site where they might have collective bargaining, all that money goes right back in the economy. That's why this guy has to go. He continues to foster economic policies that are a disaster for the Commonwealth. They've led us to be number 50. And you would have thought that instead of doubling down on more business tax cuts, at some point the light would go on and say, wait a minute, this isn't working. let's try something new.
Yeah, and
he's bogged down in ideology. That's his problem.
And
right?
you're spot on with the ideology, because all we've seen come out of this administration is nonsense. I mean, we were told it was about jobs. I remember 2010 when he came into office, he was focused on jobs. Yet all we've seen are privatization schemes, attacks on workers, and destruction of institution, and there's nothing conservative about that. Just plain destruction of the things that I think built this Commonwealth and made it one of the great states.
Right, and and people who believe in the market and that the market can solve problems, they know that ideology doesn't drive those solutions. You look at Tom Wolf, who's running for governor, and Tom Wolf built a company very successfully by understanding that, and he's privately held, but he didn't have to answer to a bunch of shareholders on Wall Street who were demanding ever and ever higher quarterly returns. He could look at what his customers wanted and what his workers needed to be able to buy his cabinets. So he shares his profits. So he gets it. He knows that all those workers in York County, that money goes right back into York County. I mean, it's just a smart business person doesn't get bogged down in ideology. They look at a problem and they find a solution. And Governor Corbett's problem has been he's looked at a problem, he took a solution that had already failed under both Bush and Reagan, and both Bushes and Reagan, and said, let's apply this solution. Okay, well, that's all right. Let's try it one more time. But once you became 48th in job creation after his first year in office, wouldn't you have thought you would look for a different? I mean, a problem solver looks for new solutions.
Right.
This guy is clearly not a problem solver. He is just an ideologue.
If I remember, he took the Grover Norquist pledge, so he couldn't go back on that.
Right. No, look, nobody wants to break up. First of all, if somebody leading a state or a business as big as the state of Pennsylvania, you never block out your options. You never say, I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to do that. A smart business person, and they keep saying, let's run the government like a business, although it can't be. A smart person, whether he's a CEO or a governor, never limits his options or her options. They always have the ability to try something new that works. And that's why it's so exciting to see a guy like Tom Wolf, who has created a successful company twice, saved it from bankruptcy, and has actually made it work. So, I mean, he really knows what works. He's a pragmatic businessman who's figured out how to make things work.
Yeah.
Right? Tom Wolf is a old style ideologue who couldn't govern his way out of a paper bag.
So what do you say? Because I'm feeling that there's an excitement gap. Some of my friends, they think it's over. They think the game is over. My concern is that people stay home. I know people are going to stay home anyway, but even more people stay home, and that's really worrisome.
Well, if I can fall back on a sports analogy, whether it's baseball or football, sometimes I've left the stadium when my team is a couple of runs ahead or a couple of points ahead, thinking it's over. And all of a sudden I'm in the car, I turn on the radio, and the other team is staging a comeback. And I'm not there to cheer my team on.
Yeah.
Now, that's what's happening here. We have people who are seeing these, and it's great that Tom Wolf's leading in the polls, but we have people who are looking at these polls and they're leaving the stands. And we need to keep them, we need to keep them on the field. Forget about the stands. We need to keep folks on the field instead of going to the locker room and getting ready for the next game, because this game is not over. We have to vote, because if we don't vote, all these fights we've had in the legislature to try to protect workers' rights and the middle class from being totally decimated, all those fights we've had to have because of November 2010. If in November 2010 Tom Corbett loses as governor, then Pennsylvania is moving forward. However, we didn't vote in 2010. It wasn't that Tom Corbett won. It's that he won because people stayed home.
Yeah. And the other part of that was Dan Addarato was really just a very bad candidate.
Well, you always have that, but sometimes you gotta put what's good for you over the person giving the medicine, right? Sometimes we know that some medicines are good, we just don't like to take them, but we should have come out and vote anyway.
Absolutely, no, and that's one of my fears here. Is the only way Corbett gets reelected is if we stay home, because not a popular guy on either side of the aisle, because he has no accomplishments. And what's interesting to me, the only thing that I've seen come out of the Corbett camp are attacks against Wolf, not something that I would think you would see from an incumbent going, this is what I did, this is what I'm standing on, elect me again because I did this and I'll do more of it. I haven't seen that, because I got to be honest, I don't think there is any.
Well, Rick, I don't want to, 2004, George Bush versus John Kerry. George Bush doesn't run on his record for re-election. He runs against John Kerry and makes people so afraid of John Kerry that they pick the lesser of what they perceive as two evils. Whereas John Kerry would have been a much better president. We probably never would have had the crash of 2008, or if we had it, there would have been a much quicker reaction. But it happens. That's why when incumbents are behind, the thing they do is they don't run on their record. They attack. What they try to do is create, you got to vote for me. I'm the devil you know, not the devil you don't.
Right.
Right. So they try to make both they know they're unpopular. So they try to make Tom Wolf so unpopular that people say, I guess I got to vote for Tom Corbett because at least I know who he is. That's what they're trying to create right now. That's why they have not run a single ad on his. Well, they don't have any accomplishments, so he can't run an ad on what you don't have. But that's why everything they're doing is negative. And the other reason they're doing negatives depress turnout. People throw up their hands and say a plague on both their houses, and they don't go vote. That's the strategy. If for any of your folks who are interested in political campaign strategy, that was the strategy of the 2004 Bush election, and these guys have taken a page right out of Karl Rove's playbook and said, if we can't win, then let's make this guy unpopular, and hopefully we'll make enough people throw up their hands and not vote, and we squeak in, just like George Bush did over John Kerry. Don't forget, John Kerry was leading in every poll until they swift voted him. Now, the good thing about Tom Wolf is his team's been ready. Every attack they've responded to. And the other thing they did that was smart, they defined themselves early. They told people who Tom Wolf was. If you ask people about Tom Wolf, he's the guy who shares his profits with his employees. Yep. He's the guy who drives a Jeep. He's the guy who has those two nice daughters. And so they set it out so people they feel like they know Tom Wolf. And so that's why this Corbett strategy of destroy has not been as effective as it was for George Bush. People just didn't know John Kerry that well. And so he was, of course, able to swift vote him. And that, of course, became a term in American political
a whole meme all in of itself. So let me ask you last line of questioning. And the election, obviously, 2 weeks from today, hopefully in 2 weeks we will have a new governor. In my hope, my concern then becomes, let's say Tom Wolf does win, that there's a lame duck. And I'm thinking Michigan of a couple of years ago, where after there was nothing left to stand in front of the voters on, you had the Michigan legislature ram through a whole bunch of ugliness. That's where they ram through right to work. I'm concerned that becomes something that may happen here in Pennsylvania. What are the chances of that?
Well, you make an excellent point, Rick, as usual. Even if Tom Wolf wins on November 4th, he does not get sworn in as governor until January 20th, which means Tom Corbett is still the governor between November 4th and noon on January 20th. The legislators, whether they win or lose on November 4th, the ones that are in office now are in office November 5th. They don't actually leave office until November 30th at midnight. So there is the opportunity that they may call what you mentioned, a lame duck session. And there may be, in Michigan, there are a lot of angry Republicans because they had lost a bunch of seats that had been Democratic in 2010. They went Republican, and then they went back to being Democrat in 2012. So you had a lot of angry Republicans. Where we're different here, and I'm not saying we should ever take our eye off the ball, but in Pennsylvania, there are good Republicans who support working families. They tend to be more moderate. They tend to reflect their districts, which might have a lot of union members or working class folks, blue collar folks. So we have about 15 or 20 solid, and we've endorsed them. We're supporting them for re-election. So we're hoping that if they come back for a lame duck session, that some of that anger that was in Michigan, we will, blunt some of that, because we will have supported, people on both sides of the aisle. As I always say, we're not a party, we're a movement. We're trying to make lives better for Democrats, Republicans, blue collar, white collar, whatever collar. We're just trying to make people's lives better. We don't care what you call yourself. If you're for us, we're for you. So we're hoping, but we'll keep our eye on that ball about the lame duck, and we'll mobilize like we did this whole year to prevent bad things happening. We're not going to stop just because we might win a race or two on November 4th. Workers' rights need defended every day of the year.
There you go. And hopefully on November 5th, you begin the mobilization and the push to get the backing that the hopefully new governor will need to push forth the agenda that I think our Commonwealth absolutely needs.
Yep, absolutely. That's great. All right.
Rick, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Okay, Rick. Thank you.
Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Come all you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are
Climate change is in large part due to human activity.
Paul Ryan backs away, sort of, from outright climate science denial.
You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers.
We may have reached peak climate change denial.
Natural gas, if extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change.
Turns out natural gas isn't a bridge fuel to a low emissions future. Plus, did a U.S. defense contractor really invent a compact nuclear fusion reactor? Separating fact from fiction.
Because that's what we do. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
From the intersection of politics and unmitigated corporate gall.
Hey, Rachel Maddow. Don't give away our address on live TV. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let me say before we begin that I am highly, highly dubious of the theories that you offered in the teaser that these right-wingers, Paul Ryan and other climate science deniers, are actually backing off of their climate science denial.
I would call it more like tricky waffling, if anything.
Yeah, at best.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, you may have heard the big splash this week that aerospace and defense giant Lockheed Martin made with a press release claiming that their research team had achieved the holy grail of nuclear energy, a breakthrough in nuclear fusion, promising small and super cheap nuclear reactors the size of a pickup truck.
No, actually, I didn't hear that.
Then again, I've been hiding in the basement with my Ebola hazmat suit on, so I don't really know much of what's going on at all.
Well, not to worry. It does look like nuclear scientists who are not employed by Lockheed Martin are pouring skepticism all over that press release, noting that it lacks technical details like actual results that can be independently verified and an actual working prototype. They say the press release appears to be just angling for more research money.
But what would this nuclear fusion device mean if it was for real?
It's perpetually 10 to 30 years in the future, but if it were for real, it would be a small nuclear reactor that would have very little nuclear waste and would hopefully be a lot cheaper and quicker to construct.
And safer, right? Because nuclear fusion is different than the nuclear fission that we have in our current nuclear reactors.
Right.
But you remain skeptical.
As do most nuclear scientists, apparently.
Good. Good for you and good for them.
Meanwhile, natural gas is not a bridge fuel that will help the U.S. transition to a low-emissions future, as President Obama has claimed. That's according to a new study published this week in the journal Nature. The study examines a lot of moving parts, including energy markets and future energy demand. But the basic upshot of this study is that even if natural gas drillers curbed their methane gas leaks, the surge in cheap, cleaner natural gas is actually increasing energy use and emissions in the U.S., which is offsetting emissions cuts from coal. And worse, investment in the fracking boom is displacing investment in renewable energy sources.
To give the context, a lot of environmentalists had pointed to natural gas, said, oh, it doesn't put off as much carbon, but in fact, it puts off a whole lot more methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And now we're using more of it because we're producing so much more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to elections, we've been reporting how the corporate media has suddenly decided to ask candidates about climate change after thoroughly ignoring it for years. In general, Democratic candidates this cycle have walked a fine line of accepting climate science without alienating the fossil fuel industry. But it's getting really tricky for Republicans, where outright denial was a litmus test in the primaries, but is not helpful in the general election. Here's Wisconsin Republican Representative Paul Ryan, who outright denied global warming as a vice presidential candidate just 2 years ago. Now he's shifting to saying he doesn't know if humans are responsible in a debate this week.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think science does either. Does climate change occur? Yeah. Yes, of course we have climate change. We've had climate change forever. Is human involvement involved? Yes, it is. What extent? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. The scientists know, but he ignores those scientists because, he's not a scientist, all of that.
It does look like the political tide may be turning against climate denial, at least according to the State Department's chief climate negotiator with the United Nations, Todd Stern.
I think we are moving toward a tipping point. We're not there yet, but it's coming, I think. You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers. I doubt, actually, that even a year from now, whether major political candidates will consider it a viable strategy to deny the existence of climate change.
I think that Todd Stern of the U.S. State Department is a climate change denier. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air and help bradblog.com do all that we do. We really need your help. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitter at Green News Report from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Dreamer, you know you are a dreamer. Can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, I said dreamer.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Yes, nothing like being last, huh? Congratulations, Pennsylvania, last in job creation. Since January of 2011, under this governor's watch, we are officially last. Or, I guess, the optimist in me says we're number one from the bottom. So there's only one way we can go. That's up. You can't get much worse than last, right? Just congratulations, I guess, is in order. Even with that, the unemployment rate has gone down over the last couple of years. Still, we're last in job creation. So that's telling me that the ideology that's being pursued, that, more of the same ideological, we need to cut taxes. And he's doubled down on this. And this is where Rick Bloomingdale was absolutely right. When you don't have anything to run on, you run on demonizing the other guy. Yeah, I may be bad, but he's worse. And scaring people going, they're going to raise middle-class taxes. Like you haven't one term, Tom? Understand, when you increase fees, that's a tax increase. A tax increase borne largely by the middle class and the folks below. When you increase the gas tax, when you increase, fees and property taxes and all of those things that, no one seems to remind us of, it hurts middle-class folks. Now, understand what he's saying in these ads, and if you've seen the Corbett ads, he's trying to make it seem like Wolf would be able to just raise middle-class taxes, which isn't, income tax-wise is not possible because of our state constitution, which is a flat tax. So all of the people who say, what we need is a flat tax, I go, well, look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a flat tax. And the very well-to-do are very, very happy with it because they pay a small percentage of their overall income, as where, 3% for someone making $10,000 a year is a lot of money. 3% for someone making $10 million a year, not so much. So when you stop and you think about, what's been going on over the last couple of years, this Grover Norquist, and I brought that up on purpose, the Grover Norquist, I will never raise taxes pledge. You got to understand what it's done to our Commonwealth. You look at the school districts that we've talked about that are struggling because of this guy, of the governor's pen. You look at our infrastructure that's crumbling because of the governor's pen. We've got some real problems. Anyway, let's take a look at an email. James sent me an email, said yesterday, Rick, you talked about FedEx. The conversation was an eye-opening look at what has been allowed to transpire. What are your thoughts on companies like Uber and the move towards a sharing economy? James, I got to be honest, the sharing economy, that's what I think we used to call having friends. Just a thought. We used to have friends and family, and that was the sharing economy. If you needed to borrow a chainsaw, you went to your neighbor and said, hey, Jim or Joe, or do you have a chainsaw I can borrow? And they would let you borrow it. Consequently, if you had a weed whacker and they needed one, they'd, hey, can I borrow your weed whacker? That's kind of what used to happen. That was the sharing. It wasn't actually a sharing economy. It was just good neighbors. And, if you needed to borrow a car for a weekend, you go ask mom or dad, right? Or a relative or somebody that, hey, can I borrow a car for a couple of days? And, generally they'd let you. I don't know that I'm upset with the sharing economy. I mean, there are a lot of interesting little models out there for the sharing economy. If there are a couple of things out there that like Sidecar is one of these app kind of things that if you're going somewhere and you want to take somebody with you, okay, you can. And drivers accept donations, which they don't accept. They don't have a rate card because then that would be something you'd have to fall under. Taxing and a whole bunch of regulatory stuff. They're donations now. But hey, if you're going somewhere and there's someone along the way that needs a ride, we used to do that when I was a kid. It was called hitchhiking. Don't do it much anymore, but we used to. Or if hey, I need a ride, can I jump with you? I kind of wonder. Again, this isn't much different in my view. So much the hitchhiking, a little more safe, not very much. And there's also this startup called FON, FON. They allow you to share your home Wi-Fi network in exchange for when you go into another area, you can use someone else's Wi-Fi. I guess it seems, reasonable. It used to be, I don't know, it's called having friends. The lending club, if you wanted, instead of borrowing money from mom and dad or your friends, you could go to the lending club, which is, I guess, a peer-to-peer lending network, and for a couple of bucks, you can lend somebody some money, and they'll pay you back a couple of bucks more. It doesn't seem overly horrible. If you need a bicycle for the weekend, there's this outfit called Liquid. It used to be Spinster, I guess, but you can borrow a bike from a neighbor. There's a whole bunch of these things. There was one I thought was interesting, Dog Vacay, where if you're going out of town and you just put it up on there, hey, can someone watch my dog or my whatever cat or whatever? I guess it's cheaper than a kennel. The question then becomes, how much of the regular economy are you destroying by having these setups? By now expanding our friend base, if you will. There's another one called Airbnb that I came across, kind of interesting, where if you go places, you could rent somebody's house. Evidently a whole house, a room, or even a British castle, which I guess they were saying. But I guess it's okay. There's also I guess another one called Poshmark, where you can put used clothes on and sell your used clothes, kind of like an eBay for used clothes. There's all kinds of stuff out there, sure. And I don't have a problem with those, James. I just don't. I do have a problem when you start looking at Uber, though, because I see Uber and the sharing economy is very different. Uber, and I guess it goes back to, with someone with great wealth came a great crime, or a way to cheat the system. And I see Uber as that, because how they're making their money, honestly and truthfully, is by undercutting drastically the taxi setup. So all the people who had to buy medallions and get special licenses and have their cars inspected and go through a whole process, they're being undercut by people who are what they used to call gypsy cab drivers, who would then just go in and they are now making a whole network, a whole setup of gypsies who are now, through the technology of the internet, they're now, able to undercut you. And what's interesting is and again, this is where that cutthroat competition comes in, James. Uber came out, and then Uber started getting competition from Lyft, Lyft. And they started this race to the bottom. And I guess at one point in the LA market, they had cut their fares in half. And then you got all these people who went out and bought their cars, invested all of this money, figuring they're making a couple of bucks a mile or whatever it was. Now they're stuck, because now they're working 15, 16, 17 hours a day, barely making minimum wage. And they're responsible for their cars, their insurance, their gas, everything that goes into this, any repair, all of that stuff. And you kind of look at it and go, now is it worth it? And I find it interesting. And I've read a couple of articles on Uber where the drivers will tell you that, everything's wonderful. Don't worry about it. Because evidently, if you don't maintain a 4.7 out of 5 approval rating, they just stop. They drop you like a hot potato. And I'm left going, wow, they can get away with that? And yeah, because the reality is once you've taken, and this is the same thing they did in the trucking industry. Once you've taken this individual and you've cut him off from the flock, they're easily exploited. They're vulnerable, and they're able to be taken advantage of. And it's one of those things that at some point, we as a working class in this country have got to wake up to the realities that, these kind of schemes are bad for all working people. Oh, this is the latest innovation of capitalism, Rick. This is getting the consumer the best deal. And you go, well, maybe on the short term, but over the long term, what ends up happening is you end up destroying whole economies. And that's my fear with all of this stuff. And I guess you could say, and I think it was David Ricardo who said, in the long run, we're all dead. And maybe that's the thought when it comes, I won't, by the time it's destroyed, it'll be behind me. It'll be someone else's problem. I mean, there is that, the locust economy, if you will, where, you're just chewing up stuff, just destroying stuff for the here and now. There is that. But at the end of the day, what you have is you've got these people who thought they were buying into the ground floor of a great business deal, and now they find out that they're vulnerable. They find out that they have no voice, that they have no rights, and they're at the whim of these companies. And that's my problem with the Uber types. And not just Uber, but, a bunch of them. Lyft is another one, but a bunch of these that are undercutting the current job market because they don't pay taxes, they don't pay Social Security, they don't pay workers' comp, they don't pay unemployment, they don't pay any of those things. And they don't pay for the vehicles or the insurance or any of the stuff that you would need to run a taxi service. I mean, I guess you could argue that the taxi companies had done that years ago, moved it to the independent contractor model years ago, and this is just undercutting the independent contractor model, which, you see that front and center. But at the end of it, James, I'm not thrilled, and nor I will never use an Uber cab. Not going to happen. I'll walk. And when we were in Chicago, we were presented a number of times with people who were trying to, undercut the cabs. And they had nice cars. I mean, the one guy was, had a nice, almost like a limo. And he was going to give us a ride. He was going to give a ride to I guess, to my producer there. I guess like for $10 halfway across town because they needed the money. It's just one of those things that makes you kind of go, is it worth it? And I guess for the consumer on the short term it is, but then what happens? And this is my other question. What happens when you destroy the current infrastructure? And there's that so-called competition is lost, where you're no longer undercutting the guy was making more, and he goes out of business. What then happens? Well, we know what happens. You start to see the prices go, and we end up back in the same situation you were in, only in worse conditions for workers and more shifting of profits. That's another one of my problems. Now, as I understand, there's an organizing effort going on right now with some of the Uber drivers and some of the Lyft drivers to get them, some bargaining power. According to one article I read, Uber says they will never negotiate with any outside negotiating agent, which means that, let's say, the Teamsters, who are doing some work with the Uber drivers, as I understand, to try and get them to come together, to give them that power of the only power workers really have. And in this case, their power would be to pull the car off to the side and turn the engine off. Or as I always say, the power to fold your arms and say, not going to work today. Because if the worker bee isn't working, guess what the queen doesn't get? Anything. And the queen bee is not going to go out there doing all the work herself. That's what you got worker bees for. And until we realize that that's how the game is played, we're going to continue to lose. So I hope that answers the question, James. I appreciate the thought, the email, the comment. And you can always email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do appreciate all emails. And sometimes I use them. Today, I've decided to use a couple extra ones just because, I'm told I don't do it enough. And I should. But, at the end of this, when I look at what's been allowed to go on, and I got a number of emails on the FedEx situation, because I think people are starting to wake up to the reality that FedEx is undercutting not only UPS, but also the Postal Service. And, you look at the Postal Service, who's been put in this weird spot where they weren't allowed to compete with certain elements of FedEx's business or UPS's business for that matter. And they've been put at a disadvantage. And for me, it's one of those things where you got to ask the question, is this the right thing? And to me, the answer is, well, no. No, not at all. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone, as always. I love the app, and I think you will too. And the best part about the app, free, just if you got Google Play or iTunes, look up the Rick Smith Show and put it right on your phone. Take the program on the go wherever you go, and it's always there. That's what's great about it. And pass it along to your friends. Say, hey, you need to listen to this, and also participate. But again, ricksmithshow.com. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, get the app Also, Stitcher on your smartphone. We do all that as well. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It's kind of hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero, trying to save the world, but never really sure.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
We're fighting for everybody here. We're fighting for the middle class, and we're fighting for good jobs in our 3 states, but for everybody else.
1,900 workers on strike at Fairpoint Communications in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are facing company demands for $700 million in concessions and the unlimited ability to outsource their jobs using non-union labor. Diane Winton, president of IBEW Local 2327, says workers recognize the company's need for concessions and offered more than $200 million, but that wasn't enough.
They want to outsource every faction of our jobs, whether it be center jobs or the technicians' jobs. They want to outsource all of it. We saw this coming, over a year ago. So we've been preparing, and the people out on the lines, the spirits are very high. They knew what the bargaining team was up against, and they supported us in all 3 states wholeheartedly, and they're in it to win it.
1,700 of the striking Fairpoint workers are IBEW. 300 are represented by the Communications Workers of America. Hundreds of current and former FedEx ground workers are suing the company for back overtime pay and to recover paycheck deductions. FedEx Ground claims the workers are independent contractors, not employees. The Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, though, ruled these workers in California and Oregon are employees. The Seventh Circuit Court in Chicago is looking at an appeal of an Indiana ruling that sided with FedEx Ground on the workers' status. By claiming their workers are contractors rather than employees, companies can cut as much as 30% from labor costs while dodging Social Security and other payroll taxes and not paying overtime. But these FedEx ground workers work under tight company rules and have to toe the company line, even as FedEx Ground claims they're not employees. As Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen expresses concerns about the impact of growing income and wealth inequality on the U.S. economy, economists are looking at growing data suggesting that economic growth is being hurt by that inequality. Aggregate demand is what drives economic growth and jobs creation, with more money being saved rather than being spent by the rich and less money in the pockets of working people. That aggregate demand has grown more sluggish. A new report from the Economic Policy Institute says the government could save $7.6 billion on public benefits to workers living in poverty if the minimum wage went up to $10.10 an hour. The report said if the federal minimum wage had kept pace with productivity growth since the 1960s, the last time it was tied to inflation, it would be $18.42 today.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can do business with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided, we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I are win. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets aligned, ain't no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-up the labor movement.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Sharon sent me an email that I thought was perfect to open up this segment with. She wrote, Rick, yesterday during the segment on inequality, I couldn't help but remember a quote from Elizabeth Warren. She started off talking about the greatest generation, and what made them great was the fact that they invested in themselves, their children, and their community. But then she said, about 30 years ago, quote, our country moved in a different direction. New leadership attacked wages, they attacked pensions, they attacked healthcare, they attacked unions. And now we find ourselves in a different world from the one our parents and grandparents built. We are now in a world in which the rich skim more off the top in taxes and special deals, and they leave less and less for our schools, our roads and bridges, for medical and scientific research, and less to build our future. And I got to tell you, I mean, it fits perfectly in with what I was talking about yesterday in the 50-year plan to destroy the middle class and diminish wages, and really to put us at the mercy of the 1%. Anyway, here to talk about his article over at Huffington Post, retailers, bankers, and Democrats agree. I've asked International President of the United Steelworkers, Leo Gerard, to come talk with us. Leo, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you, Rick.
So I look at this, this email I got from Sharon points out, look, we've had this push of voodoo supply side Reaganomics that's given more and more to the top 1% and taken it from our roads and our bridges and our kids' education and all of that. And now we're left in a very different world than our grandparents and parents had.
It's really quite disturbing that what's going on, and that there's an old proverb that says, unless you change direction, you'll continue in the direction in which you are heading. And if we continue in this direction, imagine what it will look like 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we've got, on top of that, we've got Republicans with aggressive voter suppression. We've got unlimited amounts of dark money and billionaire and millionaire money flowing into our election process at every level. And there's a statistic that I saw just not too long ago from a financial magazine, and they were asking the question, should this continue? 91% of all the profits that have been earned in the last 10 years by Fortune 500 companies, 91% of that went to either share buyback or dividends. That only leaves 9% for wages, benefits, for the less than 1%, the research and development, investing in new plant and equipment. And so that kind of greed can't continue either. And you now see retailers and others saying that the eviscerating of the middle class is starting to have an effect on their business.
Yeah.
Well, they ought to open their mouth and start demanding that things change.
Yeah. Yesterday I spoke
just whine about it.
Yesterday, I spoke with Cindy with our Walmart campaign, and she was explaining the exact same thing, how Walmart's complaining that they haven't seen any growth in 6 quarters, and they're worried because nobody's buying anything. And I said, look, wouldn't it be great if the Walmart employees could buy the products that are in Walmart because they made enough money and had some disposable income? And maybe, by the way, maybe some other folks as well.
The Walmart employees, God love them, they have to go shop at the dollar store, and what they're buying at the dollar store is all kinds of cheap crap that was made in China.
Yeah, I mean,
so that it's a never-ending circle unless we change direction. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty concerned about this election. If ordinary folks don't turn out to vote, we're going to give right-wing extremists a blank check to continue beating the hell out of the middle class and workers and people that would love to be in the middle class.
Well, let me ask you this, Leo, because there's part of me that thinks things only change when people's stomachs are empty or when they're bludgeoned over the head. Is it going to take that kind of Great Depression type pain and suffering for the working class of this country to wake up and lift their heads and say enough is enough already?
I would hope that it wouldn't take that, but let me just say this: I think a missed opportunity for us was when we had the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement was a spontaneous reaction to the gutting of the middle class, for kids coming out of college with huge debts and no jobs, for people that had jobs that got destroyed by rotten trade deals and moved over to developing countries. I mean, let's look now at this Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. Somebody needs to tell me, why the hell do we need a trade deal with Vietnam?
Because we need
Somebody
Nike
needs
tennis
to tell
shoes.
me what. Yeah, you know why? Because wages are getting too high in China.
Exactly.
So they go to, now in Vietnam, the wages are average 26 cents an hour. But why do we need a trade deal with Brunei? The Sultan of Brunei is one of the richest people in the world. He has 7,000, allegedly, I'm told, 7,000 luxury cars. And most of the work in Brunei is done by foreign workers that they import because their people don't do that work. And they got a 500,000 people population. It's not even as big as Pittsburgh, for God's sake. And we're going to do a trade deal with them. What are we going to get out of that? What did we get out of the trade deal with South Korea? We got a trade deal with South Korea that has created a huge trade deficit now with South Korea when we didn't have one before.
Right.
So you can go item by item, Rick.
No,
And I think people should be ticked off enough. And then you come to this outrageous approach by Republicans to hide behind voter suppression. I mean, they're attempting to keep kids, young people, I shouldn't call them kids anymore, young people, seniors, minorities from voting. Why? Because seniors, minorities, and young people primarily vote for progressive causes. Not just for Democrats, but for progressive issues.
Right. And they're the ones who have been they're the ones who have been mostly harmed by the Republican policies.
Yeah. And to think that we've got some of these races now that are so-called neck and neck, when Republicans have blatantly done everything they could in the last 4 years to stop progressive politics, to stop progressive change. They wanted to stop the president's job program. They wanted to stop the president's infrastructure program. They wanted to stop his energy program, which was all forms of energy need to be developed. They've tried to stop all those things. And now we're going to vote for them, while at the same time they're going out suppressing people's right to vote. And they're calling the Koch brothers to say, send in more money.
Yeah.
If I sound a little agitated, it's because I'm getting pissed off.
As I think we should all be.
Pissed off.
But the sad reality, Leo, is that the mainstream corporate-controlled media doesn't put this stuff out there. I mean, I talk to people every day who go, I don't ever hear what you're saying on your program. I don't see it in the newspaper. I don't hear it on other programs. It's not out there.
Rick, it's only because of people like you and Ed Schultz and Leslie Marshall, and there's a whole range of progressive voices that try to be out there, win radio. If it wasn't for you guys, the voice wouldn't get out at all. You'd be hollering in the dark. And I'm thankful, and that's why we support shows like yours. We don't get nothing out of the mainstream media. I mean, you know, they're scaring the hell out of people with Ebola. And now, because Ebola broke out in West Africa, they're blaming that on Obama?
Yeah.
Why don't we blame it on the fact that they've cut the NIH budget?
Amen.
For the last 10 years, Republicans have cut their budget every chance they had.
And the fact that
why don't we have a surgeon general? They want somebody to be the quote Ebola czar. Why don't we have a surgeon general? Because they wouldn't approve the president's surgeon general nomination. I mean, this guy doesn't walk around doing nothing. And now that we need him, we don't have him. We don't have him because the Republicans blocked it, and then they're going to blame the president.
Yeah, and the sad reality is they've got this echo machine out there that keeps putting it forward. But here's the thing that I keep asking. I go, what's it going to take? We see companies like Kohl's and Sears who are struggling, and you see Walmart who's complaining we're not making any profits. You know, to kind of bring this back, the economy's not growing and not benefiting the vast majority of people in this country. What's it going to take? Is it going to take these big companies saying, hey, help us, we're dying?
Look, I think that to be very candid, I think that if the Republicans were to take back the Senate in this election and hold the House, we will see right-wing extremists like we've never seen before in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And I heard you say at the start of the show that they've been at this for 50 years. I keep referring to people to say, read the Powell Manifesto by Lewis Powell, written in 1972, 71, 72. And they've never flinched from that game plan since then.
Yeah.
And that game plan was that corporate dominance of the political process was necessity. And we in the labor movement and progressive movement, we go try to do something. We don't succeed the first time, we go try something different. We don't succeed the second time, we go try something different. Our program has to stay sort of in one direction.
I'm with you.
And that direction is that we've got to be the voice of the people that want to be in the middle class. I spend time with workers every day. I don't meet any workers that want to be millionaires. I meet all kinds of workers that want to have a decent job, want to make a decent living, be able to take care of their kids, put something away for their retirement, not worry about losing their house if they get sick, and be able to have some time with their kids after work, whether it's vacation time or weekend time.
You know, I've always said that I don't want to make a killing. I just want to make a living. And I think that kind of highlights exactly what you've said. And looking at this, because, I look to the November 4th election, 2 weeks from today, we're going to the polls. The concern here in Pennsylvania is everyone thinks Tom Wolf is so far ahead that they stay home and we end up with 4 more years of misery. I see some of that going on around the country as well. So what do we do to motivate people? How do you get them out to the polls and go, hey, Snoop, get out there?
Look, I think one of the things that we're doing is we're going to talk to the sporadic voters. We've got pockets of voters all over the province, all over the state, that what they do is they vote in the presidential and they don't vote in the midterms. But if we could get them to vote in the midterms, we would make sure that we win not only governorships, but state houses. And we've learned in the last 4 years how important state houses have been when you see them beating the hell out of workers, beating the hell out of the minimum wage, beating the hell out of healthcare, doing all those things. And I think I share the same concern you do about Tom Wolf and Corbett. We need to make sure that people don't stay home. We need to make sure it goes full tilt till all the votes are cast and all the votes are counted.
Yep.
Corbett's got more gall. This is a guy who got cut the education budget so bad that they had to close schools. We're the only state that doesn't get any revenue per se of any substance from natural gas. Yet, if we just took a small slice of that, look what they do in Alaska. Alaska's not a left-wing bastion. The Alaskans get a check every year from their government because of the royalties on the oil taken out of Alaska.
Yeah, I've got a relative who lives there.
What do we get in Pennsylvania? Yeah, what do we get in Pennsylvania? We get a handshake and goodbye. I'm all for using the natural gas. I'm all for using it efficiently and environmentally sound. And I spoke at energy conferences and say, if you do this like in an Alaskan gold rush and start people's wells on fire and destroy aquifers, we'll run your ass out of the state. But if you do it environmentally sound and we get that resource and put people back to work, have lower energy costs, we can rebuild manufacturing, take some of that royalty and fix our schools, fix our roads, fix our bridges, and do it with domestically built materials, we can put people back to work.
Yeah, it's interesting
Don't do like the governor of Massachusetts just did today.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because you brought up I'm a big fan of domestic production, domestic consumption, and as we were talking during the break, you had said that what's going on up in Massachusetts is the governor has given the contract for their transportation to a Chinese company. Is that right?
Rebuild. Yeah. The governor today was proud to announce a Democratic governor, Deval Patrick, who's hinted he'd like to be president. Well, he won't get our support. He just said today that they're awarding a contract that's going for a vote tomorrow to a Chinese state-owned enterprises, $550 million to build the rail cars for the transit in Massachusetts. And that those rail cars will be assembled in Massachusetts and that'll create 150 jobs during the assembly period. Big deal. We'll create thousands of jobs in China with the state-owned enterprises that cheats. We've proved time after time after time. No one's brought more trade cases against China than the steelworkers, and we win every damn time because they cheat all the time. And now we're going to get $550 million of Massachusetts taxpayers' money going to China to build rail cars.
I'm literally stunned. Especially given the fact you look at the bridge project out in California that has been a disaster, and so I guess we're going to get Chinese built cars that are going to fall apart.
We're going to get Chinese built cars, and he's bragging that the assembly will be done in Massachusetts. 150 jobs.
And this isn't a done deal. Is there a way to stop that?
They're voting tomorrow in the committee, and we're trying to do something about it. Then we're going to try to go to the legislature and get them to rescind it. This is just nuts. This is just nuts. And by the way, that opens the door for other projects from other states because we're going to teach them how to do it to our standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's insane.
So the fact of the matter is that we're giving away our economy, and it's being done by the one percenters. You take the Wall Street banksters, they make it on both ends of the deal, right? You know, they don't give a damn where the jobs are as long as they get their cut of the pie. And again, no one's gone to jail, and the stealing continues.
But, you know, I thought there was a Buy American provision when you're using federal money. At some point, doesn't that play in? You know, I hear an awful lot about it.
That's how they beat the system, Rick. They're not going to use federal money. They're going to do it all with taxpayer dollars from Massachusetts. Same way that Arnold Schwarzenegger did for the Bay Bridge that you just referred to. The way they did it is they used tax dollars from the state, and then they didn't have to follow the federal requirements. And even there, they doctored the system because they broke the bids up into 25 separate bids and just let the same company win every bid.
Jeez.
So
this is why we need, in my view,
outrageous.
We throw the bums out. We get average, everyday working people back into the process, and we take our country back. And 2 weeks from today, there's an opportunity to do a little bit of that as we move forward. And the hope is come November 5th, the mobilization doesn't stop and that we continue to 2016.
Listen, we need to change the direction of the country.
Yes.
And I say this in all seriousness. Pick an issue, healthcare. Look what they've done with healthcare. The Republicans have stymied. It's not the perfect plan, but it would have done magic for a lot of hundreds of millions of kids now and into the future. Look at college. Kids are coming out now with collective college debt higher than family debt, more than $1 trillion. Can't get a job. We got a lady that's in one of our units who has a PhD, couldn't get a job, and now she's working in a factory we just organized for minimum wage.
Yes.
Now we'll bump that wage up now that we've organized it, but that was the job she could get, and she has $110,000 worth of college debt.
That she can she can never file bankruptcy or discharge in any way, shape, or form.
That's right. It'll haunt her forever, and if she misses payments, they'll jack the interest rate.
Yep. That's what we've done to that generation. And I got to be honest, I'm waiting for that collective outrage and that collective anger. I mean, we're seeing fast food workers in the streets and Walmart workers in the streets. I'm waiting to see more.
I agree with you. And as I said, I think that we failed in keeping the Occupy movement alive and enhanced and focused. And with the Occupy movement, we should have tried to create an economic agenda, because every one of those people in every one of those towns, cities and towns all over the place, they were demonstrating their frustration and anger, and they were doing it in a peaceful way. There was no violence. They were saying, you know, things have to change.
Yep.
And we need to have the kind of political activity that doesn't let up between elections. And as you said, throw the bums out, elect people. We got shop stewards that would make better congressional representatives. In fact, we've got a former shop steward running for governor of Maine and doing a hell of a job. He'd make a great governor, Mike Michaud.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, he was a shop steward in the union. Then he went to the state house, and then he went from the state house to Congress. Now he's running for governor. We could have dozens and dozens of people like that all over the place.
And we should. I mean, it goes back to my grandparents' generation and the work that they did and that sense of community. And for me, what the Reagan era meant was breaking us apart, pushing the individual over the community. And to me, we've got to come back together again at some point.
I agree with you. Couldn't agree more.
Hooray for me and screw everybody else doesn't work. Leo, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much. And great work you guys do at the Steelworkers.
Yeah, you keep it up. You're doing great work too, Rick.
Thank you so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
From the firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the good that rose from the ashes that remained. It began after dark as a small fire in or near a barn off to Coven Street. The barn was owned by the O'Leary family, and many of us today may remember from history books that the fire was started by the O'Leary's cow that kicked over a lantern inside the barn. However, regardless of what we were taught, it was a story concocted by a news reporter who later admitted that he had made it up because it was a colorful story. There were at least 4 factors that allowed the fire to burn almost 3.5 square miles of Chicago and kill almost 300 people. We previously noted the drought conditions and the inadequate fire service, but join us again next time for 2 more significant factors. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
I was born one morning, it was drizzling rain. Fighting and trouble are my middle name. I was raised in the canebrake by an old mama lion. Can't no high-tone woman make me walk the line. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm looking up the story that Leo just broke here on the transit contract that Deval Patrick just handed out. I'm not finding it yet. It's that new that this is just now coming down. And if that's true, wow. A $500 million contract to a Chinese company to build rail cars for the people of Massachusetts. You know, and this is one of those things that infuriates me. Look, I'm a big proponent of building building stuff domestically and using it domestically. If you're going to spend the money to invest in a transit system in a city like Boston or a state like Massachusetts, $500 million, that's how industries pop up. You know, if we don't have a company here in the U.S. anymore that builds these railroad cars or these transit cars, guess what $500 million does? That's get someone in the private sector going, hey, wait a second, there's $500 million over there. We could build those. You know, we can hire people who could do that. Might even actually get some tax credits and some education grants and some stuff to get the industry moving. Just a thought. See, this is where that entrepreneurial spirit stuff comes from. Going, hey, you know, we could put people back to work and spend $500 million in one state to redo some transit stuff. And then maybe if that works well, go to another state. And then what you've got is you've got an industry that is creating jobs and building stuff domestically. Not 150 snapping things together jobs. And no, those are important. What about the steel that goes into it? What about the plastic? What about the glass? What about all of the components that go into it? You know, that's the thing that gets me. That's an entire economy all in of itself. Yet we're going, no. The state-owned Chinese company, let them do it. That's idiotic. I mean, really, can we really be that idiotic? And coming out of Massachusetts, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that a Democrat, especially someone like Deval Patrick, who wants to be president, would do something that ignorant. That's just wow. I'm literally stumped. Literally shocked out of my mind. Jeez. Quick break. Right back.
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the ointment is gonna bring the whole thing down. The floodgates are open. We've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken. And we've fallen for the ruse.
Climate change is in large part due to human activity.
Paul Ryan backs away, sort of, from outright climate science denial.
You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers.
We may have reached peak climate change denial.
Natural gas, if extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change.
Turns out natural gas isn't a bridge fuel to a low emissions future. Plus, did a U.S. defense contractor really invent a compact nuclear fusion reactor? Separating fact from fiction.
Because that's what we do. All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
From the intersection of politics and unmitigated corporate gall.
Hey, Rachel Maddow, don't give away our address on live TV. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let me say before we begin that I am highly, highly dubious of the theories that you offered in the teaser that these right-wingers, Paul Ryan and other climate science deniers, are actually backing off of their climate science denial.
I would call it more like tricky waffling, if anything.
Yeah, at best.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, you may have heard the big splash this week that aerospace and defense giant Lockheed Martin made with a press release claiming that their research team had achieved the holy grail of nuclear energy, a breakthrough in nuclear fusion, promising small and super cheap nuclear reactors the size of a pickup truck.
No, actually, I didn't hear that. Then again, I've been hiding in the basement with my Ebola hazmat suit on, so I don't really know much of what's going on at all.
Well, not to worry. It does look like nuclear scientists who are not employed by Lockheed Martin are pouring skepticism all over that press release, noting that it lacks technical details like actual results that can be independently verified and an actual working prototype. They say the press release appears to be just angling for more research money.
But what would this nuclear fusion device mean if it was for real?
It's perpetually 10 to 30 years in the future, but if it were for real, it would be a small nuclear reactor that would have very little nuclear waste and would hopefully be a lot cheaper and quicker to construct.
And safer, right? Because nuclear fusion is different than the nuclear fission that we have in our current nuclear reactors.
Right.
But you remain skeptical.
As do most nuclear scientists, apparently.
Good. Good for you and good for them.
Meanwhile, natural gas is not a bridge fuel that will help the U.S. transition to a low-emissions future, as President Obama has claimed. That's according to a new study published this week in the journal Nature. The study examines a lot of moving parts, including energy markets and future energy demand. But the basic upshot of this study is that even if natural gas drillers curbed their methane gas leaks, the surge in cheap, cleaner natural gas is actually increasing energy use and emissions in the U.S., which is offsetting emissions cuts from coal. And worse, investment in the fracking boom is displacing investment in renewable energy sources.
To give the context, a lot of environmentalists had pointed to natural gas, said, oh, it doesn't put off as much carbon, but in fact, it puts off a whole lot more methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. And now we're using more of it because we're producing so much more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Moving on to elections, we've been reporting how the corporate media has suddenly decided to ask candidates about climate change after thoroughly ignoring it for years. In general, Democratic candidates this cycle have walked a fine line of accepting climate science without alienating the fossil fuel industry. But it's getting really tricky for Republicans, where outright denial was a litmus test in the primaries, but is not helpful in the general election. Here's Wisconsin Republican Representative Paul Ryan, who outright denied global warming as a vice presidential candidate just 2 years ago. Now he's shifting to saying he doesn't know if humans are responsible in a debate this week.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think science does either. Does climate change occur? Yeah. Yes, of course we have climate change. We've had climate change forever. Is human involvement involved? Yes, it is. What extent? I don't know.
Yeah, he doesn't know. The scientists know, but he ignores those scientists because, he's not a scientist, all of that.
It does look like the political tide may be turning against climate denial, at least according to the State Department's chief climate negotiator with the United Nations, Todd Stern.
I think we are moving toward a tipping point. We're not there yet, but it's coming, I think. You see some change of tone, even from those who have been aggressive climate change deniers. I doubt actually that even a year from now, whether major political candidates will consider it a viable strategy to deny the existence of climate change.
I think that Todd Stern of the U.S. State Department is a climate change denier denier. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help the Green News Report stay on the air and help bradblog.com do all that we do. We really need your help. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitter at Green News Report from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Dreamer, you know you are a dreamer. But can you put your hands in your head? Oh no, I said dreamer.
Every now and then I visit an elementary school. Talking with children is a pretty good idea, I think. They ask questions we don't think about, and they ask them very directly. Recently, a little girl wanted to know, what's the hardest part of your job? That got me thinking. I looked down and I told her, the hardest part is telling people no.
I'll tell you, 2 weeks from today, I hope it's circled on the calendar. I hope it's big red circle on the 4th. 2 weeks from today, I hope it's on the phone, on the calendar. I hope we've tattooed it to your hand. That 2 weeks from today, you get out and vote, and hopefully we send that guy to South Carolina to the vacation home he bought, but didn't think he had to disclose it, even though he was the top lawyer in the Commonwealth. I didn't know. Yeah, well, I hope that come November 4th, we send him on a permanent vacation and undo all the damage of the last 4 years. But it's going to take folks to get out and vote. Because I got to tell you, I look at what's going on in Philadelphia, and I've been talking about this a lot because, hey, if we allow it to happen there, it's going to happen all across the Commonwealth, which is why I've asked Jerry Jordan, he's the president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, to come talk with us. Jerry, thanks for taking time for us.
Good afternoon, Rick. It's good to be with you.
So I'm sure you've got it marked on your calendar, big red circle on the 4th to remember to get out and vote.
Yes, indeed. I'll be voting early that morning, and I will be working to make sure that every citizen that I can come in contact with in Philadelphia gets to the polls on Election Day.
You know, I look at what happened in Philadelphia with the SRC ambushing your members. And there's part of me that says they know Corbett's going to lose, and this is a last-ditch effort to impose their will. I'm curious your thoughts.
I think that there is something to that statement, but what they're doing is absolutely wrong, or what they are attempting to do is wrong. It is really a totally disrespectful action that they took against the very people who work in the schools and serve the children every day and work very hard without the adequate resources because the School Reform Commission has failed to supply them. We have teachers today who have already spent over $2,000 out of their pockets for materials and other tools for their classroom. And now as we begin to move into colder weather, those same teachers are going to be buying jackets and hats and gloves for children. We are working without a sufficient number of counselors in every school, without the nurses in every school. And this has all occurred under the watchful eye of the School Reform Commission. So their sneak attack on October 6th, when these members of the SRC voted to cancel our contract and to impose new health care plan, as well as asking for members who make up to $25,000 to pay 5% of the premium, for PFT members who earn between $25,000 and $50,000 to pay 10% of the premium, and for those who make over $55,000 to pay 13% of the premium. The open enrollment period was to have opened yesterday and last until November 14th. And individuals who were not interested in going into the personal choice 320 plan that they were proposing, which is new, that they would then, if they chose to keep the personal choice 20-30-70 plan that we currently have and negotiated for with the SRC 5 years ago, that they would have to pay the difference in the cost. And to give you an example of the kind of money we're talking about, a family, an employee with a family whose spouse is not an employee of the school district but works somewhere else, the employee would have to buy up to maintain the current plan that we have, and would have to pay a spousal surcharge as well.
Wow.
Well, with the buy-up and the spousal surcharge, that employee would have to pay $631 a month out of pocket.
That's outrageous.
It's a huge pay cut. It's a huge pay cut. Remember, I mentioned that an employee will have to pay 5, 10, or 13%, depending upon what they're making, and then add the spousal surcharge on, and then add the difference that they'd have to pay to buy up for the plan that they currently have. And that's monthly. So the School Reform Commission voted to approve that without any discussion with the union, even though we've been in negotiations for over 20 months with them. And they, the school reform chairman Green said that it was their plan to have really done this during the summer, but they didn't do it because, as things turned out, the cigarette tax that the school district was hoping for additional funding did not pass when the legislature adjourned June 30th.
And they needed your help.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
And they waited until the legislature returned, signed it into law, voted for it, and the governor signed it into law. And then they decided that the way that they would raise more money would be to do it on the backs of the employees and to use the employees of the school district to be a funding source of the district.
Wow, what a bunch of backstabbers. And now the majority of these folks on the SRC, on the School Reform Commission, are Corbett appointees, correct?
Yes, 3 are there. It's a 5-member commission. 3 are appointed by the governor, and 2 are appointed by the mayor. And the mayor is as complicit in this as the governor.
And the thing that gets me, Jerry, and what the SRC and the people who want to destroy public education, what they've done masterfully is with this whole scenario that you've laid out, they've pointed the finger right at the teachers, the people who are least able to shoulder the burden and say they're the reason, instead of looking at the Corbett administration, who really is the reason that there's a massive funding crisis, and also all of these people who are supporting 2 very different systems that divide the pie in half for the public schools and for these privatized or public charter schools that we see dividing the money, and I think creating a lot of this problem.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The SRC has approved 87 charter schools in Philadelphia, and the charter school budget is now, at least last year, was $765 million.
Wow.
That's 30% of the school district's budget. And yet they continue to accept applications for more charter schools. So they know that the charter schools are really digging a deep hole in the budget. Moody's has already told this district earlier this year that additional charter schools are going to hurt their credit rating, particularly with the low performance of the poor performance of so many of those schools. And they continue to move in that direction. So this is very deliberate. They know exactly what they're doing.
Now, as I understand, yesterday you got some good news out of the Court of Common Pleas where they've issued a preliminary injunction.
Yes, we filed for a preliminary injunction after the SRC took its action because there is a tremendous amount of harm that's going to be done to the teachers who are affected by this, and not only the teachers, the lower paid members of our school team, our classroom assistants, and our secretaries and others. And the judge heard arguments yesterday in court, and we were there for 4 hours. So it wasn't a rushed hearing. And at the end of the testimony, and when both teams of attorneys gave their closing arguments, the judge granted the preliminary injunction. And but the school district's attorneys said to the court that they would probably appeal to the Commonwealth Court, and so we expect that they will. However, there's a case that the school district filed on October 6th when they did the dirty deed to the union and the union members, that they filed in the Commonwealth Court asking for declaratory judgment in the court, very similar to what they did in March when they filed in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, asking for declaratory judgment in order to, in this case, to put in place the changes in the healthcare unilaterally, forgetting about any labor law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that says that you can't do that. You have to negotiate it. Regardless of the language, even in the takeover legislation that they're citing says that they can do it, the Act 46, the takeover language, says that they have to bargain over any economic issues, and that includes healthcare.
Right. So this leads me to believe that all of this was, all of this lengthy negotiations that you guys have had, they never, in my view, the way I'm hearing this, they never had an intention to bargain in good faith. It was all about imposing their will eventually and getting as much as they could. Because, when you tell me that when they announced this ambush, within minutes after the announcement, they're filing for a declaratory judgment in court, something that, as I've talked to a number of attorneys, have said, you don't just come up with that in a couple of minutes. That's a process. It tells me that all of this stuff was well thought out, well plotted out, and that they never really had, in my view, much of an intention of bargaining in good faith.
Well, they made the attempt to appear to bargain in good faith. However, bargaining, as they have practiced it during this round of negotiations, has meant we put a proposal on the table and we expect you to accept it. And therefore, the proposal that the school district put on the table has been for employees to pay the 5, 10, or 13%, as I described earlier, toward their health care. And the plan that they they tried to impose is the same plan that they tried to negotiate with us as well, and that we did not accept their proposal. I mean, that happens in negotiations. Neither party gets everything that they want. And the plan is not nearly as good as the one that our members currently have. And at the time, the SRC was asking for a 5, 10, or 13% pay cut from teachers as well. And they were saying that they did not want to offer any kind of a salary increase until January of 2017. And then it would be done based on a merit pay scheme. So that, we have not agreed to it for a number of reasons. And so they've decided, well, we're tired of asking for it, so we'll just impose it and take the money right out of the pockets of the members of the union.
And now, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your members, the teachers who are members of PFT, they're already in comparison to the surrounding school districts, at a disadvantage when it comes to their compensation package. I read somewhere upwards of 20% lower pay in the Philadelphia school district as opposed to the surrounding districts. Is that accurate?
19%. You're correct. You're right in the ballpark.
So then now they want even more. I mean, I guess what they want is they want, I guess you guys are going to have to teach your teachers on how to apply for food stamps next.
They'll be pretty close to it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how do we fix this? How do we change this? I mean, I think November 4th is a good start. Getting rid of the guy who I think is at the head of this problem, Governor Corbett, send him to South Carolina. I think that's a good start, right?
I agree. Absolutely. We have to turn out the vote in Pennsylvania, and we have to make sure that everyone understands the reason why not only Philadelphia schools are in the shape that they are in, but many of the other schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are hurting economically because of the cut in funding for the schools by the governor.
Yeah. I've got a daughter in 7th grade, and she tells me she goes to this LGI class, large group instruction. And in the large group instruction class, there are 100 kids in her class. That to me, I don't know that I'm not the teacher, but that doesn't seem conducive to learning.
No, it certainly is not. How can individual students get the kind of attention from one teacher or even two teachers in a class that big? They just can't.
Nope. Which is why I think, as I've been saying on this program for years now, this is the hill the middle class has to die on, because if they take public education away, we end up with a two-class system. Those who can afford a good quality and thorough and efficient education, and those of us who cannot.
That's correct. And, public education is the backbone of democracy in this country. We cannot afford to let it disappear.
I'm right with you. Jerry, I appreciate you taking time away from this, I'm sure, very hectic and very busy time. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Always good to be with you, Rick.
Thank you. Jerry Jordan, president of the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. I'm telling you, that's really an absolute screw job. It just is. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Hi ho, hi ho, it's off to war we go. With a hip hip hooray, we'll send ISIS on its way. Hi ho, hi ho. Here we go again, into yet another war in a tumultuous swath of the world involved in centuries-old conflagrations we Eurocentric Americans don't comprehend and cannot resolve. For a preview of what we're stepping into in Iraq and Syria, let's remember Afghanistan. Beginning in the yesteryear of the Cheney-Bush regime, the promise was that our Afghan excursion would promptly dispatch the Taliban and create a stable democratic government. But it turned out to be both the longest war in American history and a dismal failure on all counts. With more than 2,000 U.S. deaths, nearly 20,000 of our troops horribly maimed, and over $1 trillion spent. What have we won? Far from defeated, the Taliban is again on the offensive. Afghanistan's elections are a farce, government corruption is flagrant and rampant, the infrastructure we built is already crumbling, there is no national unity, and more than $100 billion of the money we sent for reconstruction and training was simply stolen by the elites and shipped in suitcases to their foreign bank accounts. The good news is that our nation's Afghan debacle is scheduled to end this year. The bad news is it won't. A contingent of U.S. troops will remain. We will keep paying $5 billion a year to sustain the Afghan army and police, and we're on the hook for billions more each year to fund that country's bankrupt government. This is Jim Hightower saying, so hi ho, off we go to Syria, Iraq, and beyond for what is already being called, quote, a long war. The tab just for the direct military cost of this latest misadventure will be as much as $22 billion a year. How much good would that money do if we invested it here in our own people?
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe?
Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days I'm gonna blow my top, and that sucker, he's gonna pay. Lord, I can't wait to see their faces when I get the nerve to say, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
I've been saying for a while that the hill that the working class of this country has to die on is education. And I go back to a lot of the things that we don't get exposed to in schools, like labor's history and the battles that built the middle class, and all of the things that when I think back to going to Wisconsin in February of 2011. When we took the program out there and we slept on the floor of the Capitol there in Wisconsin, as Scott Walker began what really has been a transformational time in our country's history, and not a good one either. One that has been the hallmark of this movement is destroy workers' rights, destroy the voice of citizens, suppress the right to vote, and destroy and go after public education. I'm literally shocked, with all of the things that we talk about on this program, that there aren't more people absolutely outraged by what we're seeing. And this situation in Philadelphia is really in my view, a departure from what my grandparents' generation believed in. You sit down, you negotiate. I listened to Jerry and I listened to Ted Kirsch the other day explain how this whole thing plays out. And I got to tell you, from the seat that I have watching this, I don't think there was ever any intention of the SRC to bargain in good faith. They wanted submission. They wanted the teachers to capitulate. They wanted them to give in and say, well, take it all. Take it all. We don't need it. We'll be like the Walmart workers. We'll file for welfare. We'll ask for LIHEAP. We'll ask for social programs. And the question then becomes, and this is one of those questions that I keep asking, as a society, when are we going to have the conversation where is that the direction we want the country to go? Because I would argue for my God-fearing capitalist friends, shouldn't your work pay? Shouldn't that, when you punch that clock 40 hours a week, shouldn't that be enough to sustain a modest living? Shouldn't it? Instead of having this propped up low wage economy where you work for crummy wages and crummy conditions, and then you have to go begging to the local and state and federal governments for saying, hey, I need rent assistance, or I need food assistance. My kids need school lunch programs, and all. Is that the way? Because I would argue that is a massive redistribution of wealth, especially when you have a tax structure that doesn't tax the very top as high as I think they should be taxed. So what you have is and then the idea, and I think we talked about this the other day, the idea is then you start dividing that working class up into the people who get those subsidies, the earned income tax credits and the school lunch programs and all of those things, and then the folks who make just enough who don't. And as Jerry was laying out the breakdown in numbers, he said a 5% increase in their healthcare costs for if you made under 25,000, 25 to 50,000, it jumped to 10%. And then, 50,000 and up, it jumps to 13%. I'm thinking, what if you're the guy who makes $25,000, $1, and now you've got to pay 10%? Or the guy making $50,000, $1, now you're paying 13%? The idea then is to divide those folks up. You start dividing people and getting them pointing fingers at each other and infighting. Because then they're not coming after you. This has been 50 years of conservatism, 50 years of corporatism has brought us. This is what the Reagan era was all about. And, now the Walker, Snyder, Scott, Corbett era. Look what it's done. We are number 50th in the country in job creation. Policy failed. Promise not kept to anybody. And I can't even imagine the business people are all that thrilled because, look, they were promised, hey, we'll give you a boatload of money and our economy will thrive. Well, it hasn't. So I do believe time for a change. And I hope you've got it marked on your calendar. I hope November 4th is etched on the mind. We're just 2 weeks away from the day. Don't be complacent. Don't think, hey, my neighbor will do it. You do it. That's the reality. You got to get out there. You got to vote. Simple stuff. And if you don't vote, I don't want to hear you complain when this guy keeps us at 50th and our Commonwealth is the laughing stock of the country. Just a thought. Quick break. Right back.
And I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from your rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
We're fighting for everybody here. We're fighting for the middle class, and we're fighting for good jobs in our 3 states, but for everybody else.
1,900 workers on strike at Fairpoint Communications in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are facing company demands for $700 million in concessions and the unlimited ability to outsource their jobs using non-union labor. Diane Winton, president of IBEW Local 2327, says workers recognize the company's need for concessions and offered more than $200 million, but that wasn't enough.
They want to outsource every faction of our jobs, whether it be center jobs or the technicians' jobs. They want to outsource all of it. We saw this coming, over a year ago. So we've been preparing, and the people out on the lines, the spirits are very high. They knew what the bargaining team was up against, and they supported us in all 3 states wholeheartedly, and they're in it to win it.
1,700 of the striking Fairpoint workers are IBEW. 300 are represented by the Communications Workers of America. Hundreds of current and former FedEx ground workers are suing the company for back overtime pay and to recover paycheck deductions. FedEx Ground claims the workers are independent contractors, not employees. The Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, though, ruled these workers in California and Oregon are employees. The Seventh Circuit Court in Chicago is looking at an appeal of an Indiana ruling that sided with FedEx Ground on the workers' status. By claiming their workers are contractors rather than employees, companies can cut as much as 30% from labor costs while dodging Social Security and other payroll taxes and not paying overtime. But these FedEx ground workers work under tight company rules and have to toe the company line, even as FedEx Ground claims they're not employees. As Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen expresses concerns about the impact of growing income and wealth inequality on the U.S. economy, economists are looking at growing data suggesting that economic growth is being hurt by that inequality. Aggregate demand is what drives economic growth and jobs creation, with more money being saved rather than being spent by the rich and less money in the pockets of working people. That aggregate demand has grown more sluggish. A new report from the Economic Policy Institute says the government could save $7.6 billion on public benefits to workers living in poverty if the minimum wage went up to $10.10 an hour. The report said if the federal minimum wage had kept pace with productivity growth since the 1960s, the last time it was tied to inflation, it would be $18.42 today.
Workers Independent News is brought to you with support from union-owned and represented Bank of Labor, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can do business with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
The walls come tumbling down. The walls come crumbling, crumbling. The walls come tumbling, tumbling down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Lots of things going on. And I look at this thing in Massachusetts that I'm just now coming around to. And what I'm trying to figure out is how I'm gonna I can't answer that. That's got to be over here. I'm sorry. She's gonna have to. Anyway, the way this looks is it's having a little phone difficulty in the middle of the program. And this is what happens when you get into one of these situations where the phones just don't want to seem to work. And the reality is, evidently the Massachusetts transit system has given, and it's even worse than I thought, according to the news report put out by the republic.com. What they've pointed out is that the assembly work, about $1.5 billion of new subway cars for the MBTA is coming to Springfield. According to advanced schedule put out by DeVal Patrick late Monday afternoon, who leaves office in December, says it will be in Springfield on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, which I guess was this afternoon, just happened, to make a major MBTA-related announcement. It's going to be the site of the former Westinghouse plant that was the CNR Changum Railway Vehicles. They've proposed building a plant. Now, as it looks like, from what I'm seeing, the authorization for the board to approve a contract with this Chinese-owned company is going to give them looks like $5.6 billion to build the red and orange line cars. According to the reports, Hyundai of South Korea has proposed building its plant on Progress Boulevard there. There will be only one winner, according to Patrick, and I guess they sided with the Chinese plant. And you look at this, and you got to go, what exactly do you end up with by not making that here? And there's a lot of frustration that goes into this with me. That it's a frustrating thing. There's a lot of anger, in my view, of things that we could have and we should have been doing. And that, I got to tell you, is really kind of frustrating, especially at a time when our infrastructure is in such a shambles. And at a time when, honestly and truthfully, the reality is we should be building that stuff here. Are you telling me that the only way that factory, that plant in Springfield restarts is if we give a contract to a Chinese company? Really? Is that it? Is that the only way it happens? Seems kind of idiotic to me. But it's one of those things where you go, what is. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
A boy with a gun. I got a picture in my pocket of the lucky one. I'll announce the winner on the radio with my microphone. I do a super show. I wear a cowboy hat. It is my business hat. I'm on till 1 a.m. I must tell you that I'm a man with a mission.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Explosions in the Syrian city of Kobani over the weekend. The U.S. says it's reshaping the situation there. In addition to scaling up airstrikes, the U.S. delivered weapons and medicine to the city's defenders today, with the Pentagon stressing that 21 tons of goods were Kurdish in origin and were simply transported aboard American aircraft. The UN's lead official for sexual violence in conflict said today that a recent trip to South Sudan left her shocked by the hardships faced by the country's population. Zinab Bangura said she learned of widespread rapes committed by both government soldiers and rebel fighters. 74% of victims were under 18 years of age. Tens of thousands of displaced persons have fled to camps where the vast majority of shelters are currently inundated with water. That drives residents out of the compounds and to rivers and streams where they are regularly preyed upon.
Anybody you know in a refugee, whether in Syria and you in the camp, you sit down from your bed, you eat with your children, you do everything on the floor. You can't do it because you actually put your foot knee-level mud. That's how bad it is with mosquitoes and everything. It's just unbelievable.
The talk these days in the running world is about breaking the 2-hour marathon mark. The current world record holder is only 2 minutes from that time. But at yesterday's running of the Beijing Marathon, none of the conditions were in place for a record performance. During the 2008 Olympics, Beijing authorities seeded clouds and shuttered factories to keep the skies clear for athletes. Sunday's race was conducted with extreme levels of air pollution, 14 times higher than what the World Health Organization says is healthy, and the kind of levels when even the Chinese government urges its citizens not to exert themselves outdoors. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the good that rose from the ashes that remained. It began after dark as a small fire in or near a barn off Coven Street. The barn was owned by the O'Leary family, and many of us today may remember from history books that the fire was started by the O'Leary's cow that kicked over a lantern inside the barn. However, regardless of what we were taught, it was a story concocted by a news reporter who later admitted that he had made it up because it was a colorful story. There were at least 4 factors that allowed the fire to burn almost 3.5 square miles of Chicago and kill almost 300 people. We previously noted the drought conditions and the inadequate fire service, but join us again next time for 2 more significant factors. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happy!
Well, the worst of times now, they don't faze me. Even if I look and act really crazy, I don't wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. Bitch to find me when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So here in Pennsylvania, one of the great things that this governor has done, facetiously speaking, the Rapid Bridge Replacement Project. Evidently, Pennsylvania is, along with being the worst in the state in job creation, we also have the worst infrastructure. We are number 1 in, the worst job creation, and also number 1 in the number of structurally deficient bridges. Evidently, we've got about 4,200. I've seen numbers up around 5,500, but according to the Corbett people, about 4,200 structurally deficient bridges. The average age of a bridge here in the Commonwealth, about 50 years old, giving us that title of basically the worst infrastructure. So what did the Corbett people come up with? A new innovative way of taking care of our bridge problem. We're going to enter into a bunch of public-private partnerships. And the hope is that about 500 decaying bridges will be replaced starting next year with this great new tool. Here to talk a little bit about this, in my view, what is another of bad privatization schemes. I've asked Ellen Dannin. She's a professor and writer, also a Truthout contributor. I'm here to talk about her article on the big party that just was the big privatization party. Ellen, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, I look at these schemes that keep popping up, and we're sold on this idea that this rapid bridge replacement project that the Corbett has put forth is somehow the magic bullet that's going to end 20 or 30 or even 40 years of disinvestment. Is this the right idea, or just another one of these bad ideas?
Well, I actually would like to go back a little bit before that event, because one of the things that happened was that the Pennsylvania highway engineers had invited me, and also somebody. I was supposed to be the anti-privatization, and the other person was supposed to be the pro-privatization person.
Right.
But I was ready to go down to Harrisburg down to southern Pennsylvania to talk to them. And I got a message that I had been disinvited because they didn't want to have the word had come down from on high that they did not want to have anybody say anything that would be kind of put a damper on that process.
Why would we want both sides? Why would if we're sold on something, why do we want someone who's gonna give us the other side of the story,
or just more of the story? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a he said she said sort of a thing, although that seems to be the way that a lot of folks may handle things. But it meant that people didn't really get to have some information that would have been useful for them. So just FYI, I thought you might find that pretty interesting.
It is interesting, and I guess it's very telling on how this administration, and I would assume many people who favor these new quote unquote innovations, how they would operate. And I got to be honest with you, just on a common sense level, this idea of somehow putting a profit motive on how I get back and forth to work while telling me you're not going to put up toll booths, I'm not seeing it. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out how private interests are going to put up all of their money and shoulder all the risks so I can have a safe road or a bridge to drive over. I guess I'm just not seeing it.
Well, yeah, and that's really an interesting thing about what's going on there. And I've wondered about that a lot too. And somebody that you might want to invite onto your show in the future would be Randy Salzman. He's a writer for Thinking Highways, and he has really dug into this issue. And he came to he started finding that at year 15, these public-private partnerships all went bankrupt, and that what ends up happening is that they basically get bailed out mostly through the tax code. And so that is a really important story and analysis. So you should definitely have him on.
And I'll try, but just from a common sense point of view, I mean, everyone that I talked to knew what was going to happen in Indiana happened. And I had talked over the summer. I had driven across the Indiana Turnpike, and I said it's horrible. It looks like it's been bombed. It's when finally the state of Indiana gets it back, it's not going to be worth even gravel. And look, the company that the Spanish, Australian, whatever company came together, and now they're going bankrupt, and they're going to sell it off to somebody else. And who gets stuck holding the bag are the people who are at the end of the line, and that's going to be the taxpayers.
Well, one of the things that happens with this is that there's, it looked to me quite a while back as though there was going to be this, not serial monogamy, but serial, P3s for like 15 years, and apparently there may be some parts of the tax code, and I'm not a tax person, that are promoting that. Now to get back to the bridges, one of the things that that they were touting as how they were going to, go forward with these replacement of the bridges, this rapid replacement, was they were going to divide up the bridges into types, and that would make it much more efficient to replace these bridges. But as a former Pennsylvanian myself, there is not a lot of flat, similar land anywhere in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so I would be really interesting to know the details of how they were going to come out doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting experiment to watch, and it's going to be very costly. So we better get some enjoyment value out of it because we're going to be paying for it, in my view, for quite some time. But I'm still trying to figure out how it is they make money by rebuilding the bridges. Are we going to be paying them every year? Is this some kind of a lease agreement where they build it and we lease it from them? How do they make money?
Right, and so that's the bankruptcy part of it. And when they go through bankruptcy, then they, you get to come out, fresh and clean. When you get a fresh start. But apparently, and I, Randy Salzman has done a really super job. He took a look at the various ways that money gets filtered to their bank accounts. It's just part of that whole thing of going bankrupt.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've
kind of amazing.
We've seen the exact same things when you look at parking authorities that have been bought up and privatized, and how they bond out the money and they pay themselves back immediately. And of course, the taxpayers are stuck with it. We've seen how they've done it with transit authorities and all of that. So this is just the next bit of the commons being bought up, sold off, and profitized by a handful while the rest of us hold the bag. I get that. But what bothers me, it seems to be very bipartisan. And as you write about in this Truthout article, that the Treasury Department and the Transportation Department held a big privatization party where the whole point was more P3s and more of this, in my view, what is a bad idea.
Well, and of the people who were, the structure of that meeting was, they had these panels come in and give a talk, and then, they had about four panels, and then they had this private part in the late afternoon to which it was only by invitation, and that was not videoed. So I watched the other, the conference itself, and they just were. It was so ironic because this conference was taking place right at the time when things were crashing in the privatization world.
Well, just because it didn't work for them doesn't mean, look, we've been following the same bad economic theory for the last 40 years. And we've got a governor who's following the exact same thing. What makes you think we learn in the when a bad idea is a bad idea, but it profits a handful? What makes you think we're going to ever learn our lesson?
Well, I do think, having talked to regular people on the street and all of that one of the things that the average person feels really uncomfortable about privatization. You get some people who are, strictly ideological.
Right.
And, they just think private is always better and the public sector can't do anything good. And that's, so that people kind of buy into that sort of ideology. But most people feel really uncomfortable about having the infrastructure that we have bought and paid for. It just doesn't seem right to have it go to these foreign countries, and I don't mean just foreign from a different country, but they are not part of what's going on with us in terms of building our roads and keeping them in good shape.
And, I look at here and what's happened is, I think back to my grandparents' generation who thought this way of investing in the future and investing in your business to where it grew and you had opportunities. The last 30 years, at least in my view, we've kind of walked away from that and said, you know what, we can just live off the investment in the past, and, whoever's in the future, let them deal with it in the future. Or at least that's what it seems to me.
Yeah. And one of the things that has, is a shining model of a successful strategy, is thanks to Dwight D. Eisenhower.
You mean the socialist?
Right, him. The thing was that back in the day, the top marginal tax rate was 90% of the income tax. And just to make this really clear, it wasn't 90% on everything.
Nope.
But when you got at a certain level, that was going to take 90%. So there was a disincentive to accumulate tons of money yourself.
Or to use it in one of the many loopholes. I mean, 1953, you saw the top marginal rate at 92%. And in today's dollars, to pay that 92%, you'd have to be about $1.6 million in income. But it also had tons of loopholes, of which I'm a fan, which encouraged them to spend money on schools and hospitals and libraries and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. And, so it's interesting to think about this because right after World War II was over, they went to work building our interstate system. and they came out of it, with, they were basically, it was pay as you go, and we are still benefiting from those roads, although now we have left them in disgraceful shape instead of following on with that legacy.
Yeah, but if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was sold as we needed for the military. And I've always said the only time anything we ever get anything done is if it's for the military. I mean, you look at school lunch programs and school milk programs. The whole reason those came about is we need to fatten kids up to get them on the front lines. And the only way, well, it's true. And the only way that we could justify the interstate highway system was Eisenhower said, because the Germans were able to move missiles and bombs around. And if I remember right, that's how it came down.
That was the rationale given for it. And, having just been through many years of war, maybe they were honest in thinking that was what they were doing, or maybe they just, it was a PR job. You'll have to ask Dwight what was on his mind when you see him next.
I loved his library. I'll tell you that. We had an opportunity to go to his presidential library a couple of summers ago, and it was fantastic. But I look at this, and I would argue we are in a different kind of war. I look just today. In fact, Deval Patrick, the governor of Massachusetts, just handed away a $500 million contract to the Chinese to build part of their infrastructure. And there's part of me that goes, when are we going to wake up and realize that the infrastructure that we have here, we should be building with materials made here and jobs that were created here. And oh, by the way, maybe good paying union jobs so people have money to put back into the economy. Kind of something that my grandfather told me years ago.
Well, and one of the other things that's, just hot new in the news right now is this, the repair of the San Francisco Bay, or the construction.
The Oakland Bay Bridge, yeah.
Yeah, that bridge, where there is just, it is so shoddily put together. And, that it's just shocking that they would have constructed it that way.
But here again, who ends up holding the bag? It's the taxpayer. And this is where I have this struggle with these P3s, with these public-private partnerships, or these privatization schemes, however you want to frame it. That at the end of the hill, at the bottom of the hill, if you will, as we know the saying, what rolls downhill, we the taxpayers are down there catching it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a real challenge, but I do think that that there is hope. I'm not necessarily Little Mary Sunshine, but I do think that people are really concerned. Your average person on the street is just really concerned about these kinds of issues. And you can have a good conversation with people about this.
Yeah. No, I mean, at the end of it, don't you think this is about really changing the direction of the entire country, though, because this is no longer what I'm talking about is no longer this blind faith belief in the private for-profit market. I don't know that education, healthcare, infrastructure are things that should be put in a profit mode. I don't believe that the only reason people do those things is to make a buck. I think there's something called the common good, and we should be returning to the idea where we do things collectively that we can't do individually that benefit all of us.
Well, right. And you remember, I believe it was Patrick Henry who said that we must all hang together or we will hang separately.
Certainly, yeah.
And I think that certainly applies to the privatization proponents. That's the, they want to see us hang separately.
And doing quite a masterful job of it, because I'm looking at this, at all of these different schemes, and it takes me back to Wall Street before the 2008 collapse, where they had, if I remember Alan Greenspan saying it, that to regulate the derivatives, they were such a complex financial tool that the regulators couldn't regulate them. Therefore, we're not going to regulate them. It's the same kind of thing. When we have these new innovation things that nobody really understands and we can't get our head around, should we really be doing them?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Because I worry we see another 2008.
Complex financial instruments that nobody understands. That's really, that should be telling you to back off and go to something that's clear, you understand it, and then you're much less likely to be snookered.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, in looking at this big privatization party, To me, having read your piece, and it's a fantastic piece you've written. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. Just click on Ellen Dannin's name. It'll take you to both of her pieces that she's written on this topic. But the one on this party, I go, the Obama administration, who I would hope, would know better. I would hope. I voted for him, hoping that he would. Is pushing this as well. So this seems to be mainstream political thought, at least pushing us in this direction.
Yeah, in general, I think President Obama has done a lot of really good and useful things, and I also think that the history will show whether I'm correct or not on this, but that he's an organizer. I looked at his, I did some looking around at his bio, and he has basically throughout his life done things that involved organizing and organizing skills. And I just have this gut feeling that he's looking way down the road to what you have to do at each step of your strategy.
Right.
And that, he's looking at what gets us incrementally closer to where we need to be. So in a few decades, come back and we'll see if I was right about this.
Yeah, and I agree with you on some of that. I mean, I look, as much as I'm not a fan of the healthcare law, I do think it was something that was desperately needed, and we'll see in 10 or 15 years where it takes us, because I'm a huge proponent of getting away from the employer-based model. I think you should have healthcare from cradle to grave. It just makes sense to me. But at the end of it, you're right. I think in a couple of decades, we'll figure this out. But my fear is, in the short term, we follow these bad innovations that take us really in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, last question I've got for you. In looking at, as you talked about this Randy Saltzman's piece, about 15 years, you're saying, is the length of this before bankruptcy hits.
Exactly. And actually, the story that you have up on your web page, talking about the Treasury Department and Transportation Department's privatization party, there is a link there in paragraph 3 that says Randy Saltzman recently exposed. Not himself, but
I hope
but
not.
the story. And so you should be able to find that link and take a look at the analysis that he's presented.
Well, I got to tell you, Ellen, I appreciate the work you do. I very interesting, and it's stuff that I think folks need to read up on and have some understanding of, because most people I talk to think, wow, the P3 is a great idea. We're going to have the private sector fund all of our roads and bridges. That way we don't have to pay for it. Yet we find out the taxpayers saddle with what, about 90% of the cost?
That's exactly right. And in some cases, it's been 97% of the costs are public costs that the private sector has only put in 3%.
Yeah, so much for risk sharing.
And by the way, I didn't dig that up myself. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton had her staff take a look at these P3s and how much was private, how much was public, and so she's the one who came up with that figure. There were 2 other projects that were being people were testifying to,
right?
And she asked them what percentage they thought was public versus private, and it was like 10% private and 20% private. That was kind of ballparking it. So much for the magic of the market. The magic of the market is the public sector.
Yeah, well, the magic of the market is being smart enough to go, we're not putting private money into it. We'll let someone else. Well, what was that movie, OPM, Other People's Money? We'll use other people's money for our gain. Seems to be what it is. Ellen, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for the work you do, and I'd love to have you come back and talk with us again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks so much, Ellen Dannin, writer, professor, and Truthout contributor. Again, take a look at the articles that she's written over at the ricksmithshow.com. Just click on her name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
There isn't anyone immune from globalization. In fact, the confluence of greed and geography blends seamlessly over all of humanity. As the American workforce has become more sophisticated and smart, corporations have become less agreeable. Of course, there were numerous road signs that led to globalization, and at this point, somewhat improbable that any single cause could be raised from the economic wreckage it has created. However, 1976 may have been a high watermark for the American economy, where a change in the tax code emboldened corporations to move more operations overseas. Where these gutless entrepreneurs once shuttered factories in the Northeast and moved them to southern localities, they were now served up by the U.S. Congress, a world plate where even to their insatiable greed, the possibilities seemed limitless. The assault on American workers continued in the 1980s when the Reagan administration further retooled the tax code to allow foreign investors to set up American subsidiaries, thereby artfully managing the exodus of U.S.-based corporations. The unseemly alliance between Congress and corporations offers little solace to workers, but does shine a perpetual light on the misgivings of unregulated money flowing into the pockets of greedy politicians. Unions, while greatly weakened over the last 2 decades, continue to mount credible defenses, proposing balance, equity, and fairness for workers over the broader brush of Congress that would have us believe that globalization can regulate itself. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Minute is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Lots of things going on. Lots of insanity. These P3 things just got me nuts. That still we're talking about more these financial tools, innovations, if you will, that we know. Look, as the old man always told me, if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend 2 to get it, and vice versa. So if you've got these very wealthy people going, hey, we'll fund your infrastructure, you've got to kind of ask some questions. Just a thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
I understand that the Treasury Department and the Department of Transportation last month had a big party, a big privatization party to push the idea of more P3s and going to get the private sector to fund our infrastructure.
Well, if the private sector funds the infrastructure, then the private sector is going to put a toll out there. They're not going to do this for fun and giggles, you know. Now, I will give you an idea that, you have a case, Les Wexner, funded to get a highway built in Ohio, funded his own money, but it was very clear he was putting in a share of the states. It helped the company, and then the state put in the rest. But that was right out front, no expectations years back, all right?
Right.
But in general, if you privatize and I was on the U.S. House Transportation Committee, so I can tell you, if you privatize the highways, we're done. Stick a fork in us, because gas taxes go into the system. They come to D.C. That's how we have our trust funds and infrastructure funds. And if the private sector goes into it, again, unless there's something I'm missing, they are not going to do this for free.
No, we've seen numerous reports come out that they aren't actually doing it for free. What ends up happening, they claim they're going to privatize it. Then the local municipality government floats a bond or something that pays them back, and they end up walking away within a year or two, almost prepaid back. And it's the taxpayers who hold the bag. In fact, I was just reading something before that said, of the money goes into these projects, about 97% of it's public money, even though they're claiming there's this is a P3. But the private people, they want their money, or they wouldn't invest in it. Seems simple to me.
They're going to have to deal with, trust fund next year and keeping the trust fund afloat. But there's been a system that built our interstate highways, from Eisenhower forward, and it's worked really quite well for the size of our country when you really think about it.
Yep.
And there's more to go, but to privatize it would just not. Look at prisons.
Yeah, no, I'm look at what we're doing with education. Look what the privateers have been doing to a lot of things. I mean, and once they get the education and have the prisons, there's no point in educating people because we can just milk them along in education and put them right into prison. Good profits for everybody.
And I can tell you this right out front and personal. When I was in Morgantown Federal, they had a lot of corporations were getting work done for $35 a month. Is what the prisoners were paid, and people said, well, they're getting a skill. Well, no, it was really inputting data, and it's not anything they would be doing on the outside. It's just something they did to occupy their time on the inside. But the corporations got somebody for $35 a month.
Yeah, not
an hour a month.
And I think back to after the Civil War, where you saw states like Tennessee who were locking up former slaves and then putting them to work in the coal mines, leasing them out to the coal companies to work in the coal mines, and the riots and all the things that came out of that. I mean, you just go back and learn our the labor history of this country, and it's nothing new. We're just redoing the same thing, only with little slight variations.
Right, Rick. This next story, I literally. I double-checked it to make sure it wasn't a hoax, and it's on immigration. I know you know what I'm talking about, the documents that are
I'm shocked.
Bid.
I'm reading this, and I'm just shocked.
And I headlined it as I put this out to our stations today, is this really a shocker, question mark? And, that action on immigration is anticipated after the election, but they have asked for a bid and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and they want 34 million blank work permits and green cards. They want it to be 9 million front-loaded. In other words, maybe they'll need 9 million or so up front before the 4-year period that this whole thing runs. I just thought it was very fascinating because they're being printed now, and sort of no doubt in my mind that after the election, which the White House was going to move before, and then they didn't. After the election, there's going to be something on immigration.
Sure.
I did look up statistics. We do about 800,000 of these anyway per year.
Yeah, that's a huge difference from 9 million.
Right, but we do that. I mean, we do that amount, and now that's an average, and it did grow. In about an 8-year period of time, we went from 31 million immigrants to 9 million more in a very short period of time. So exponentially, it grows, because a family comes here and they can then request for relatives to come here, and that has no limit.
Right.
So even putting all that together, there's probably still room here for some type of new immigration law that's going to kick in. I mean, from the White House.
Yeah, I can just hear all of my crazy Tea Party friends
tomorrow morning
losing their minds, going, "Oh, see, they're not securing the borders," and the people who were believing we should have travel bans from West Africa, even though we don't have any flights from West Africa. I can't wait. I got to be honest, I can't wait for the reaction because I know this is just now breaking.
Yes, it is, and I guarantee you tomorrow morning the entire right blogosphere is just going to be fired up and all over the place. And
so let me ask you this, Bob. Why in God's name would you do this now? Why if you there's part of me that honestly believes Obama wants to lose the Senate, because why would you allow this stuff? I think the Democrats want to lose the Senate, because why would you do this 2 weeks from Election Day?
You have asked the right question, and one other radio person today asked the same question, because that's where it's, even if this is being done on purpose, why just not wait a little bit? And I just think maybe it's just some incompetency rather than political thought, within an agency or something. But on the topic of the Senate, that's becoming seriously, Rick, fascinating by the hour, because tonight is the big debate. Scott Brown, of course, is trying to defeat Senator Shaheen in New Hampshire, and the whole political part of this country is going to be watching that. He is behind. He's going to try to do, the kind of Hail Mary there at the first debate, and he wants to move ahead of her. If he doesn't budge her tonight, frankly, I think that's a great big indicator, because, the right, the Republicans are thinking that they're going to take this one. Then you've got Senator Angus of Maine, who is reaching out to the independent candidate Orman in Kansas, and he has told him by phone call, why don't you keep your powder dry as to which party we'll deal with? Now, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
If Orman beats Senator Roberts, and you have two independents there, we have Bernie Sanders, but he normally caucuses with the Democratic side, but say you have two independents. Let's say that hypothetically the Republicans win the Senate by one seat, and you have two independents, they don't know who they're caucusing with. Even putting that all aside, that one seat doesn't give the Republicans enough for this, the cloture vote, which is not simple majority, but 60 votes.
Yeah, no one's going to have the cloture vote, but and there's part of me that goes, maybe this is what we need. You need the Republicans to control the Senate so that they can pull out all of the insanity that they really want. And then you just have 2 more years of gridlock. Because I got to be honest, even if the Democrats control the Senate, I still think you're going to see 2 more years of gridlock.
Yes, and there's one other thing that Republicans tend to do that the Democratic side is really good at not doing. The Republicans tend to eat their own alive when their own take control. And what I mean by that is this: it's happened in the past when I was in Congress. When we had a Republican Senate and Bob Dole was the leader of the Senate, they didn't have, a huge majority of votes, and there's some things they couldn't get done. Well, we would hear from our base all the time, Rick, why did we elect the Republicans? They can't even do anything. They can't stop Bill Clinton. Well, this is going to be the same case. So the base within 1 year is going to be saying, we elected them. They're not stopping Obama. So I'm not sure this really hurts Hillary Clinton in 2016 if the Senate goes Republican.
No, I think it helps them, and I think it helps the Democrats because the Republicans will be more vulnerable in 2016, as I understand, having to defend seats kind of like the Democrats are in the situation this time.
That's right. So I thought it was very, very fascinating tonight. A lot of eyes are going to be on that debate in New Hampshire to see who does what.
I find it interesting that the people of New Hampshire are okay with Brown hopping across the border.
I made a comment today. We do stations in that part of the country, and I actually I was asked about the race. When I'm asked, like with your show, if you ask, I'll comment opinions, which you ask a lot. And this one show asked me, and I said, well, isn't he considered a carpetbagger? In New York, you can get away with that. I know you really can't in Ohio.
Nope.
And I don't think you can in your home state. Nope. I don't believe. But they tell me, well, we're pretty independent souls here. So because I just thought, how can he get away with it?
Yeah, I mean, I understand if you've moved from Massachusetts and you live there and you're part of the community, but having been the senator from Massachusetts and then hopping over the border to be the senator there, that's just no. I'm surprised.
Get it. I don't know. In Ohio, that really wouldn't. If I was an Ohio senator and I decided to move to, Pittsburgh and then run there, I don't think it would sell well.
Well, I know it wouldn't sell well here, but it'll be interesting to watch some of the debate, and my eyes will be on it as well. What's going on in Florida? I understand some electronic issues, red light cameras coming.
This is a very, very fascinating case in Florida. Down with the district judge has ruled that they can take the photo of the car as you go through the red light, but the camera reader, the employee, cannot issue a citation. So they can see, okay, Bob went through the red light, but they can't issue a citation. Now, this makes it interesting because if this holds, that means that the police themselves are going to have to go look at every one of those camera stops, and that's just not going to work. So this may, if it holds through, may undo the red light photos as we know them.
Yeah, because I know.
Not make me mad at all.
I know a lot of people who have gotten them, especially in Cleveland, where they've almost gone exclusively to them. And I have to be honest, I got one in Maryland, going through. I was following everybody else. A couple of days later, I get a love letter in the mail from the state of Maryland. They're asking me for $40.
Yes, I don't like them anyway, so I kind of like this story today.
Yeah, that's good news.
I think so.
I hope it goes the other way. And look, it could be a good jobs bill. It's good for the cops. Maybe they'll get some more cops.
But remember, they'll privatize it.
Oh,
all right.
Oh, there you go. Also, I see that one of the journalists in North Korea has been released.
Yes, he he had left a Bible in his hotel room, and that's what this whole to-do was about, which I guess is very, very taboo over there. They have released him. You never know the rhyme and reason of what they're doing, whether the other couple prisoners are going to be released too or not. Who knows? You just can't read North Korea.
Yeah. So has Un been cited lately? I mean, I know he had missed some big state function, and there was some question of if Un was alive or if he was suffering from ankle something or other. Or...
Yes. Well, they had a speculation of he ate too much cheese. He was suffering from ankle things. I think he had some type of semi-serious illness. He's around, but he still isn't out there all over the place like he normally is.
Yeah, that's a huge difference from from Il, who was supposedly the greatest at everything and never got sick or anything. I think what do you have, 100 hole-in-ones and some of the other crazy things that they claimed about him?
That's right.
Yeah.
Very strange place.
Very, very strange place. Last question I've got for you. So I'm noticing that the rhetoric is kind of tapping down a little bit on the Ebola scare. We're evidently not all going to die.
Well, it has calmed down a lot. Now, Congressman Issa is going to have the big hearing Friday, which I really don't think much attention will be paid to it. There's been a lot of hearings on Ebola. People don't realize that, but he's going to have his own a couple weeks before the election. He wanted the czar to be there. The czar doesn't actually start working till next Wednesday. So he's not going to be there. I don't think much of a case can be made against the Ebola czar. But Congressman Issa is going to bring in some Homeland Security or people or somebody. I'm sure he'll beat someone up.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I look at the Ebola czar and I go, do we really need one? Isn't that what the Surgeon General is supposed to do?
Well, two things. One, the Republicans, as you know, held up the appointment of the Surgeon General, which is just ridiculous. And then the White House, in a way, sort of caved to a lot of pressure. We're going to have this special czar. When in reality, I think, there was enough people to handle this. Sometimes you make this next layer of government and it doesn't go that well.
As an email I got earlier in the program, someone said that in the same time that we've been focused on this Ebola crisis from April forward, 300,000 people in Africa have died of malaria, 600,000 people of tuberculosis, and you go, about 2,400 have died of Ebola since the beginning, which I guess was 1976. Seems like malaria and tuberculosis, something maybe we could be looking at there as well.
Yes, and this has been around since 76.
76, yeah.
26.
There's just no money in curing it, though. Not enough people with money are getting it.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Just like when AIDS first started, everybody said, well, it was the gay disease. Then all of a sudden, then it went into the straight community. Then they started to react.
Yeah, well, as I remember it started off as GRID. Yeah, if you remember that, and then it changed into AIDS, and yeah, you're right. It was that's when then the money started. Anyway, Bob, great talk with you. I look forward to having you back again.
Thank you, Rick.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Hi ho, hi ho, it's off to war we go. With a hip hip hooray, we'll send ISIS on its way. Hi ho, hi ho. Here we go again, into yet another war in a tumultuous swath of the world involved in centuries-old conflagrations we Eurocentric Americans don't comprehend and cannot resolve. For a preview of what we're stepping into in Iraq and Syria, let's remember Afghanistan. Beginning in the yesteryear of the Cheney-Bush regime, the promise was that our Afghan excursion would promptly dispatch the Taliban and create a stable democratic government. But it turned out to be both the longest war in American history and a dismal failure on all counts. With more than 2,000 U.S. deaths, nearly 20,000 of our troops horribly maimed, and over $1 trillion spent. What have we won? Far from defeated, the Taliban is again on the offensive. Afghanistan's elections are a farce. Government corruption is flagrant and rampant. The infrastructure we built is already crumbling. There is no national unity, and more than $100 billion of the money we sent for reconstruction and training, was simply stolen by the elites and shipped in suitcases to their foreign bank accounts. The good news is that our nation's Afghan debacle is scheduled to end this year. The bad news is it won't. A contingent of U.S. troops will remain. We will keep paying $5 billion a year to sustain the Afghan army and police, and we're on the hook for billions more each year to fund that country's bankrupt government. This is Jim Hightower saying, so hi-ho, off we go to Syria, Iraq, and beyond for what is already being called, quote, a long war. The tab just for the direct military cost of this latest misadventure will be as much as $22 billion a year. How much good would that money do if we invested it here in our own people?
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, to bless my soul, you load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Still can't get it out of my head. I just can't get it out of my head that the Val Patrick, it just blows my mind. $500 million contract handed over to a Chinese firm. And you got to wonder, why? It's actually left me just kind of stammering, going, what exactly are we doing? It's nuts, just nuts. Anyway, a little Twitter news. Commissioner Ajit Paja, one of 2 Republicans on the 5-member FCC, warned in a Washington Post op-ed on Saturday about the National Science Foundation study of people's communications on Twitter, which he said amounted to government monitoring of speech. Quote, seems to have come straight out of George Orwell novel. He said in the U.S., the government has no business entering into the marketplace of ideas to establish an arbitrator of what is false, misleading, or a political smear. He went on to write, the federal government has no business spending your hard-earned money on a project to monitor political speech on Twitter. And I guess the question is, well, why not? Depends on, I guess, what government does with it. I understand for years they've been monitoring phone calls and monitoring, communications because, hey, we live in the terror era. This is the post 9/11 world, don't you know? He goes on to say, while the vast majority of memes arise in a perfectly organic manner, driven by complex mechanism of life on the web, some are engineered by the shady machinery of high-profile congressional campaigns. According to him, the project sounds a lot like the FCC's controversial plan to study the editorial practices of newsrooms, which I have said, and many others have said, is a violation of the constitutional right of the press. He also was a major critic of, and his alarms helped to scrap the program, which was shut down. Some people not thrilled. Also on Twitter, yesterday we talked about Monica Lewinsky. Sent out 2 tweets yesterday. Ended up getting like 40,000 followers. She gave a speech to a bunch of millennials, in a 1,000 plus millennials in the under 30 summit here in Pennsylvania. Oddly enough, And where she said, and it's one of those things that caught my attention. She said she was patient 0. She was the first person to have her reputation completely destroyed worldwide via the internet. And it's true. I mean, you go back and you read some of the and a lot of it was just made up BS. And that's where the Drudge Report made their bones by smearing this woman. And when the Star Report hit online, all of the, everything that happened between her and Clinton were just right out there in public. And you got to ask the question, is that, I don't know. I get that the point was to destroy Obama, to destroy Clinton. But, I don't know. If it was my daughter, I think I would be furious. And now she says her coming out has a lot to do with meeting the family of the Rutgers student who evidently back in 2008 killed himself because some of his classmates took pictures of him in an intimate setting. And I remember this. He was a homosexual, had some encounter that was photographed or videotaped, and once it hit the web, it's one of those things. So she says she's out there to share her story with victims of cyberbullying and online harassment, and good for her. I think it's a good thing. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com, Rick Smith Show app. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.